Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Ashley and I am going to be making a very big, long, tall, fast, strong video about Assassin's Blade. Assassin's Blade is the prequel to the series Throne of Glass, which was written by Sarah J. Maas. I may say Moss on like here and there on accident because I definitely called her Sarah J. Maas for a very long time. I also may get some pronunciations wrong here and there, so please flame me for them. I know that they're there. I'm just gonna do my best because this is a long video. I'm making this video because it doesn't exist yet. I haven't seen anyone make one of these. So at time of posting, one of these doesn't exist yet for this series. I have long been a fan of this format. This is my favorite series. I adore this. I have read every single Sarah J. Maas book. It is January, looking at my calendar, 12th right now, and the third Crescent City book is not actually yet out, so haven't read that yet, obviously. Throne of Glass is my favorite series out of all three. I discovered this series not because it was popular, not because I knew who Sarah J. Maas was, but because I wanted to continue the bond I had with my mom when she was here living with me for a bit, taking care of me after her surgery while pregnant. She read so much when she was here and I was like, how do you read that much? And she was like, I don't know. I picked up Throne of Glass after wandering a Barnes & Nobles for 3 hours, reading the backs of books. I didn't want to Google what is popular, what do people like, because honestly, I don't care. Because when I got into the plant community, I collected what other people thought was cool and I didn't give myself a chance to discover what I actually liked. Upon getting into booktube and book Instagram and whatever, I wanted to figure it out for myself. So I very purposefully just did not listen to anyone. I had no idea. I had never heard of any of these series before at all. It was like when I walked into a greenhouse for the first time and I was like, all of these are just plants, none of them have names. And I discovered the Sarah J. Maas table. I picked up the Assassin's Blade book jacket, opened it as it was the hardcover to read the inside sleeve, and immediately I was just captivated. I loved the idea. I had my mom Google the series for me so that I wouldn't get any spoilers, and she told me that there's a related series called ACOTAR, which a lot of people seem to like more than Throne of Glass. So I read the little blurb for ACOTAR and I was not as interested at all as I was in Assassin's Blade. So I discovered this completely organically. I am striving in this video to give you the experience that I had when I went through and read this for the first time. I have now read this book 3 times, and by the time I take you through it, we will have done it 4 times total. And I have 28 pages of detailed notes. Here's my little annotations. We got a lot. And we got a lot. We have a lot going on here. And my goal for this video is for you to have felt like you read this book. And I'm gonna do my absolute very best to give you that feeling. One of my favorite things to do when I finish books now, and I didn't start doing this until I read every single Sarah J. Maas book because I didn't want any spoilers. I love watching videos like these about books that I've read because it helps me feel like I'm living through it again, but I can do it while I'm doing other chores. So it's almost like I'm listening to an audiobook, but I can't listen to audiobooks because I get way too distracted and I just kind of like tune it out versus watching a YouTuber talk about something. So this is not something I've ever done on my channel before. I really hope that people watch it because I have put tears into this project. Like this has been a week of me going through this ruthlessly, writing down, highlighting. But if no one watches it, that's also totally fine. I've never done something like this before. This is not something my audience likes. And I'm a little bit retired since I'm 37 weeks and 4 days pregnant. So we're almost there. I want you guys to love this as much as I love it. Wow, ACOTAR is also amazing and Crescent City is amazing. Throne of Glass is the underappreciated and underhyped series of the 3. I want to gush about this with someone, and the only person who I could gush about this to still hasn't finished Kingdom of Ash, and we started reading these at the same time. Love you, Jasmine. She's watching this video. She was like, I want to reread it, and then she was like, oh, I guess I'll just rewatch your video when it comes out. So yeah, I think let's just jump into it because this is a very meaty video. I am going to be giving you a spiderweb red thread situation here virtually. I do not want to print paper to do this. It's not some virtuous reasoning. I just simply do not want to set up my printer and print it or go somewhere and print it. So just a little bit about Sarah J Maas and this book's development. And if you see me looking over here, it's because that's where my notes are. I can't help it. If you see me looking here, that's because that's where I am. And there's gonna be 3 different. I can't do anything about it, I'm sorry. So Sarah J Maas, I'm just gonna start calling her Sarah. Sarah. She started writing Throne of Glass and its prequels when she was 16 in 2002, which is pretty cool. It was originally called Queen of Glass, supposed to be a Cinderella story, but if Cinderella went to the ball to kill the prince, Bloomsbury picked it up in 2010. They workshopped it for 2 years and did finally publish it in 2012. Prequels, which is what we're talking about today, is 5 novellas. 4 of the stories were published in 2012 separately. One of these was written in 2014, and this was published in 2014. So I don't know if she wrote the 5th one to put with this book because this was going to be made a book. And if you're like, Ashley, what's a novella? A novella is just like a really tiny novel. We're gonna get into it. Oh my god, I need another table. Please let me go. Please let me go. I'm doing something. Seated in the council room of the Assassin's Keep, Selena Sardathian leaned back in her chair. It is almost 4 in the morning. This had better be important. Perhaps if you hadn't been reading all night, you wouldn't be so exhausted, snapped the man across from her. There are 5 of them there, 5 of Arobyn's 7 most trusted assassins. Selena herself is 16 years old. She's fair, tall is described as about 5'7". She's about 135 pounds, which the book doesn't say, but it's an assessment based on just a bunch of information. She's got about blue eyes. We'll go into more detail about her eyes in a later book. Super bleach blonde. Arobyn is about 37 years old. He is very cunning and possessive. He's tall, muscular, handsome, with a fine-boned face, long auburn hair, and silver eyes. Also at this table is Sam Cortland, who is 17. He has chestnut bronze hair, golden brown eyes, and high, elegant cheekbones. The other people at this table don't matter. They're sitting here at this table because one of the other 7 closest assassins, Gregory, has actually been unalived. He had been captured, so they needed to send an assassin to go unalive Gregory because he would talk. Arobyn says that he has done just that he sent Ben, and Ben is dead, and now Gregory is dead. And so now 2 of the closest assassins out of the 7 of them are dead, leaving now only the 5 of them that are there at this table. And also no one bothered to go pick up their bodies, which really bothers Selena because she really liked Ben. Ben always like helped her take care of her wounds after she would get injured. She's also sitting there at this table like very relaxed in dressing robes, very thin silk dressing robes. She's not wearing clothes underneath, and she's 16 again, reminder. And she remarks about how beautiful she is. It's a weapon just like a knife, and it has to be honed like one. Also, she needs to keep her boobs from falling out. Her and Sam get into a spat about Ben because Sam is sitting in Ben's spot right next to Arobyn, and Selena doesn't like that because she really liked Ben and she really doesn't like Sam. Sam picks a fight with Selena about this, and Arobyn basically tells them to shut up and tells Sam that he's stupid for picking a fight with Selena on that night of all nights. Selena thinks in her head how nice it would be to kill Sam, how she could take him any night because she will always win, and how nice her knife would look in his throat. She's really upset. The scene ends because she decides to storm out of the house. She's gonna go get Ben's body because no one else bothered to. She clearly is the only one who cares enough about Ben to go retrieve his body, so she's gonna go get it. She tells all of them to essentially like go screw themselves because she's not gonna go get their bodies if they were in similar circumstances because they didn't bother to do that for Ben. Then we get this amazing line, okay? 2 months, 3 days, and about 8 hours later, Selena and Sam are waiting for a late Rolf in his office. Captain Rolf is the king of pirates, and his character description is late 20s, approximately 28, but we don't know for sure. He is lean, tall, and has broad shoulders. He is very heavily tan, and he has bright sea green eyes and shoulder-length dark hair. Both of his hands are heavily tattooed from wrist to fingertip with a magical map that rumor has he sold his soul to get. Selena remarks about how she was quite a scene walking into this tavern. She had to keep her identity a secret. Nobody knows who she is or how old she is. Wearing billowing black capes, exquisite black leathers, a mask which goes like over her face, I think almost entirely. It also distorts her voice, making it deeper, but it's not like charmed. It's not supposed to do that. I think it just muffles her voice, and so she's able to like talk deeper. The outfit transformed her into a whisper of darkness that would turn heads. The mask and clothes are a necessary precaution, one that protected her identity. All of Arobyn's assassins had been sworn to secrecy about who she was under threat of endless torture. She never tells us why. We learn later, but in this moment, she's just this mysterious, really cool 16-year-old assassin. While they're waiting, Selena is like messing around in the office. Sam is like, hey, put that down. She's like grabbing maps. She reads a love letter. She drinks his alcohol, plays with sapphires and gems that he has just on his desk. She sees something like shiny and she swipes it before Sam notices. So she's taking something from the desk. Sam is like, dude, cut it out. She goes, what? Well, if his pirateness is gonna be late, I don't see why we can't have a look around the things he just decided to like leave out. Sam is there to keep Selena on track. Why Arobyn needed to send someone to like keep an eye on her for like surveillance purposes is confusing because she's supposed to be Adderlin's assassin. I don't know why he would feel the need to send like a babysitter for his best assassin, but he did. Sam says that they have no idea when he's gonna walk in, so they need to be ready and look professional. And she goes, dude, we are in the most disgusting tavern in the world, which they are. The floors are creaking, which they do, and we will definitely hear him coming, so chill the heck out. Without warning, all of a sudden, Rolf walks in. There was no creaking floors. With Sam like sitting in this chair respectfully, and Selena's got her feet up on his desk and she's leaning back in his chair, and he's like, looks like you made yourself a home. And she goes, I don't see why I shouldn't have. He closes the door into the study. In her head, she's like, wow, he's such a fool for doing that. Like, doesn't he know who he's locking himself in here with? Doesn't mind that we don't have weapons, which the guards down at the bottom floor had taken their weapons away. She's like, our hands are just as lethal as the weapons. Why are Sam and Selena here? Arobyn has told Selena that he has discovered who killed Gregory and Ben, and it is some of Captain Rolf's pirates. He sends them with a missive to give to Captain Rolf in order to be paid back for the lives of his two most inner circles. And Selena's very cocky about this. She's like happy to be punishing someone. So she like throws the letter down on his desk and he takes a knife out of his pants. Selena had no idea that he had that, which she calls herself a fool for not knowing that he had a knife, that she should have seen that. But then she continues to side step Benny. She's like, well, even if he has a knife, like I'm still way better than him. And she's just very cocky and arrogant. She's very swaggering. Think like Captain Jack Sparrow, except that she's not drunk. She's just like that all the time. In his letter, Arobyn actually said that he has decided Captain Rolf is not the person who killed his men and that he is free, but also that he wants to trade slaves with him. And this really stabs Selena in the heart, metaphorically, because she really doesn't like that. How could Arobyn stoop so low to selling slaves? And she gets really upset inside. And she also looks like an idiot. What Arobyn had told her the reason for her being there was a lie. And apparently Sam knew the entire time why they were really there, because he played it off really cool. Selena is absolutely livid that Arobyn would ever deal in slaves, and she really has to restrain herself from punching Sam below the belt because he clearly knew. In their shared room with two beds, as soon as she closes the door and they realize that they are alone, Selena whirls to Sam, clearly about to fight him because she decided she was gonna hurt him. He's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Before you hurt me, I had no idea either. And she's like, yeah, you clearly did. You clearly know exactly what's going on. And he was like, no, I'm just better than you at pretending like I know what's going on. Selena starts to doubt that instead of Arobyn lying to them both about why they were there, that Captain Rolf actually just lied about the contents of the letter, because it is way easier for her to believe that Rolf lied to them rather than Arobyn lying to them. And this is a problem that we'll get with Selena this entire book. She really trusts Arobyn with her entire life, loves him like a father. She has a very hard time processing when Arobyn will trick her to get her to go and do things. Slaves, she spat, dragging a hand through her braided hair, catching in the plait, which is a braid, P-L-A-I-T. If Ben were alive, he wouldn't stand for this. Side eye? Side eye. Selena and Sam are at dinner later in the mess hall with Captain Rolf, and Selena cannot eat, which becomes a point of conversation. And Rolf and his men start to tease her about how ugly she must have to be to wear a mask, even to dinner, which prevents her from eating and drinking. She threatens to give Rolf a reason to wear a mask himself. And Sam kicks her under the table and then she hits him back in the shin. It's like a cute little playful moment. Then we get some lore. We learn over dinner that Captain Rolf's map no longer works because the magic in the land has been banished for the last 8 years. Not banished as in it's illegal to practice, but there's literally no magic. there was magic and now there's literally no magic. 8 years is exactly also the time that the Fae have been banished and or executed, which was when Aderlin, which is like the empire, like the huge empire, conquered and enslaved the entire continent, and then magic just disappeared. Selene and Rolf have a moment where he questions how it's possible for her to be such a loudmouth and arrogant, swaggering person. Sam, meanwhile, is completely well behaved, and how on earth it is possible that Arobynn has not checked her arrogance. And Selene responds, I'm the world's greatest assassin. I don't need to be afraid of anyone. And Captain Rolf wisely says back, in my opinion, really, because I'm the world's greatest pirate and I'm afraid of a lot of people. Throughout the night, Selena cannot stop thinking about the slaves. She's tossing and turning and is really struggling to comprehend how it's possible that Arobynn chose her to send to pick up hundreds of slaves. She decides on this night that she is not going to bring the slaves to Rolf. She's going to find a way to free them, actually. She has 2 days to figure out how to get out of Arobynn's deal and come out of it alive. And so this is where we get the quest for this novella. On the walk to the slave den, we learn about the shipbreaker, which in my head is this absolutely huge chain. I mean, like larger than life chain. It stretches across the entire bay and it prevents ships from leaving. And ships can only leave if the shipbreaker chain gets lowered. It gets lowered in my head by this contraption that just kind of like drops into the ocean and then it like raises it back up. So all of the ships are stuck in port unless they can get this chain up, which is a really big important thing to remember for later. It requires a lot of effort and time to lift or lower, and slaves will arrive tomorrow afternoon. There will be some guards on the boat, and so she needs to learn information, and this is like a pretty decent place to start. Back in their room later, Sam asks Selena what she's planning because he wants to know what they're in for. She feigns ignorance, but he keeps pushing. They grew up together, and so he knows how to tell when she's like cooking up trouble, and she doesn't tell him what she's planning. They begin to squabble. He does the cute thing where he like catches her by the wrist. She threatens to stab him in the neck. How cute. Really cute scene between Sam and Selena. They don't speak again for the rest of the night, and later the next day, Rolf takes Sam and Selena to inspect the slaves. It's mostly people from Elway, which is how we're gonna say that. Some of them are drawing like invisible marks in the air. During the inspection, the duo get the rest of the information about the schedule for the slave transfer. They're like completely done. They get out of earshot, and then Selena like stomps away. She's like very upset. And Sam is like, hey dude, chill out. And then they get to the beach and she stomps into the water and she's like going into the water. And Sam is like, dude, cut it out. Grabs her arm to get her to stop like going into the water. And she just completely attacks him. Like, she goes crazy. And after a small struggle, Sam easily beats her. And I just want us to remember back to the beginning of the book where she's like, she could take Sam any day. She was way better than him and she'll always win. They end up with him on top of her. We've got this like classic, he's got her arms pinned. He's like right in her face. They're like this. His knees are on her thighs. She's like pinned pretty painfully. And she's like, let me up. And he's like, I'll only let you up if you promise not to kill me. And she's like, fine, I promise not to kill you. And he looks at her for a second, and she looks at him, and he looks at me, and I look at him. He finally lets her up. This makes me so sick that I might, she couldn't even finish the thought. Sam says, might what? Might do something as foolish as attacking Rolf's men in their own warehouse? I might do something as foolish as freeing the slaves. Sam went so still, he might have been turned to stone. I knew you were thinking up something, but freeing them? I'm gonna do it with or without you. I'm being judged harshly.
Are you reading?
I'm gonna do it with or without you. Rolf will kill you, Sam said. Or Arobynn will, if Rolf doesn't first. I have to try, she says. Sam steps so close to her that she had to tilt her head back to see his face, okay? And Selena is 5'7". We learn later that Sam is like 6'2" or 3" or something. Like, he's very tall, and she's like looking right up at him.
Sorry.
You're fine. We're assassins. We kill people. We destroy lives every day.
Gasp.
Did you say gasp? Sam says, you realize this is the most reckless thing you've ever done, right? And she goes, reckless, but maybe the most meaningful too, right? And this is a huge, like, turning point for Selena. Then we have the smartest thing that Sam has ever said in his entire life. Sam's gaze drifts northward as if he could see the sprawling capital city and its towering glass castle. I think there's more at work here than this trade agreement. Selena says, what do you mean? He says, why send the two of us here in the first place? His excuse for sending us was a lie. We're not instrumental to this deal, and he could have easily sent any two other assassins who aren't at each other's throats all the time. She says, what are you implying? And he says, perhaps Arabin wanted us out of Rifthold right now, needed to get us out of the city for a month. Selena goes, Arabin wouldn't do that. A chill went through her. Wouldn't he? Sam asked. Did we ever find out why Ben was there the night Gregory got captured? And then she goes, if you're implying that Arabin somehow set up Ben to, and he goes, I'm not implying anything, but some things just don't add up. There's a lot of questions that haven't been answered. And she goes, well, we're not supposed to question Arabin. And I love Selena so much. She's literally my favorite female character from all three of the series. By God, in this book is she just like a brick. Like she cannot. And it's trauma, right? All of this is definitely trauma. Sam is so smart. He's really smart. And he goes, since when do you even follow orders? And she goes, you know what? Let's just get through the next days and then we'll consider whatever conspiracy theories you're inventing. She straight up says that he's like crazy, which is just the best. And they both make the decision together to free the slaves. They stare at each other meaningfully for a long time and she blushes. Heat fills her cheeks and Sam slyly mentions, maybe we should just never go back. Maybe you and I should run away together. They decide that they cannot run away because it doesn't matter where they went, Arabin would find them and kill them. Those of you who've read the series before, are you with me? Are you honed in? Surprisingly cold breeze sweeps past her. Selena turns north toward the source of the breeze, which smelled of a faraway land she hadn't seen in 8 years. Pine and snow. A city still in winter's grasp. What a sweet moment. Back then, she hadn't had any choice. When Arabin offered her this path, it was either that or death. But now, she took a shuddering breath. No. She was still just as limited in her choices now as she was then. So she like almost has this moment where she like kind of transcends, but then she doesn't. We get another scene where Rolf, Sam, and Selena are again checking on the slaves. They both hide their anger from him pretty poorly, and they acquire the last bit of information as they leave, which is the times when the guards are changing, which is very important to them. There's a little montage of them like walking around the town. Sam flirts with some street harlots affectionately to get info, and Selena bothers the drunks in the local tavern. A couple hours later, Sam and Selena stalk off in a rowboat. No one notices them, head towards the twin slave ships loaded with slaves. She knocks out every single person on the boat. And this is really important. She knocks them out. Selena doesn't kill them. She's literally an assassin, okay? But she's not killing them. Her death toll is 0 right now. She gets really nervous because Sam takes too long to signal to her that he's okay. It really stresses her out. But eventually he does signal to her. She ties up the guards and locks the captain in the brig, and then she finds the slaves. She finds a slave named Dia, who is an Elway man. Arabin forced to speak in the common tongue when they were like checking out the slaves for the first time. She gives him instructions that at exactly 4, they need to start rowing for the shipbreaker and not to stop. They will not make it out of the cove if they stop at all. The slaves also do have to go to the other ship, Sam's ship, to warn them about the plan as well, because there is no one on the other ship speaks the common tongue as far as we know. So in order to be safe and make sure that the other slaves also get out, which is over 200 slaves, this is over 200 people, by the way, that she's attempting to free, Dia needs to go over to the other slave boat and tell them all what's going on. Selena and Sam head back and they go to a big dinner on their final night. At the party, Sam and Selena pretend to be very drunk, and Sam has like drilled a hole in the bottom of his ale mug, and nobody notices the constant like puddle around his ale mug because everyone is like cheering and there's alcohol just going everywhere. So, and Selena's not drinking obviously because she has her mask on. After revelry and some small flirting between Sam and Selena, they wreak havoc. So Selena turns, and this is so like comical montagey, okay? Selena trips a pirate, and this starts an all-out brawl because as she trips the pirate, someone else trips into someone else, and then they start like fighting, and then that just makes everybody fight. All hell breaks loose. A stereotypical bar fight happens, and Sam and Selena, after fighting with a bunch of people, eventually slip out. Selena and Sam briefly meet up, and Rolf finds them and questions them. He's like, you know what? It's so interesting that you guys are leaving, and also that you are the one who started the bar fight, and you're not even there to like finish the fight. Rolf is like, you know what? what was your real purpose here? Like, you've been really weird and I don't really feel like you're interested in the slaves. And like, he's just questioning her. And then as he's like asking her, like, why are you really here? You're clearly not here for the reason you said. All of the oars come out of the slave ships. And Rolf slowly turns and sees this. And then he looks at her and he's like, I'm gonna kill you. Sam takes off and Selena faces against Captain Rolf alone. He has the upper hand until she distracts him by taking off her cloak and mask and completely stuns him because he realizes that the person he's been dealing with this entire time is a 16-year-old bleach blonde pretty girl. He loses it, but then he does get a couple hits in, but she does beat him, knocking him out. She leaves him there, does not kill him, and runs toward the tower. She glimpses Sam on top of it. The slaves are literally almost to the death chain, okay? And if that chain is not lifted by the time they get there, they're dead. Like, literally, they are going to slam these huge wooden boats at top speed into these chains. Selena realizes in this moment when Sam is still struggling to free the chain, there's not enough time for the chain to come down and the slaves are going to die, and they have just sent 200 people to their death. But just then, Sam raises his sword and just barely comes down on this like lever that's being held by a rope, and he cuts the rope, and as he does this, a massive catapult trebuchet thing launches across the water at the death chain tower, like where it's being held up, and the trebuchet massive boulder thing instantly makes the chain drop just in time. I'm talking like, you guys, literally the slaves were gonna be dead. The chain falls, and right as it finishes going under the water, the boats go through. Very close call here. But as the tower gets hit, another trebuchet boulder hits his tower, and the entire tower collapses with him still at the top inside of it, which is obviously not good. She's running towards him to try to figure out, like, oh my god, is he still alive? Like, her heart like drops, and this also surprised her because she didn't like Sam. Now she's terrified that he's dead. As she's running towards him, Rolf like comes out of nowhere and gets the jump on Selena. He's like got this knife to her throat and everything. He's like, you're so stupid. And she's like, actually, you're stupid. And then she like suplexes him and completely destroys him. And then she goes, okay, you have one option, or I'm going to kill you. You're gonna sign these 2 contracts. The first one says that you're never gonna sell slaves again, and actually also that Pirates Bay is now going to become a safe haven for slaves freeing Adderlin. And the other one says that you're not gonna do a slave trade with Arabin. And if you don't sign these, I'm gonna kill you. And he goes, I'm not gonna sign those. Like, you have to be stupid. She goes, oh, well then I'll just sign them for you because I actually stole your signet ring because you were stupid enough to leave it out on your desk and we made it into your office before you. And he looks down at his hand and realizes his little ring's not there. And that little shiny thing that she stole from underneath the maps at the very beginning of the story was in fact his signet ring. So she's like, well, I'll just sign it for you. Save you the trouble. You know what I mean? Since you're clearly so busy. If he breaks either contract, she will hunt him down and murder him, and she will find him to the ends of the earth. She convinces him to sign it. He does. And he's like, you're crazy. And she's like, I know. And then she knocks him out. She doesn't kill him, she knocks him out. She's killed no one. I want you to know. She's killed no one. The Empire's best assassin has not killed a single person, but she just beat them up. She sprints over to where she saw Sam last. She's digging through the rubble and she finds one particularly large portion of wall that looks about just over Sam's size, right where she had seen him last. So she's like panicking, okay? She talks about how hard it is to hold in her scream, and there's like tears in her eyes, and her fingernails are breaking, which is a big deal because Selena really cares about her appearance, her hair, her nails, okay, her outfit. Everything has to be perfect, and she's literally, and I know this sounds so stupid and girly, she's breaking her nails, and I'm not talking like, oh, her fake nail chipped off. No, she's ripping her nails out of her nail beds, trying to lift this piece of rock. So it's not like, I just need to be clear with you, for those of you who don't understand this. This part of her nail, this, okay? This is being ripped off. There's no extra nail there, okay? It's off. You know, for some reason, I don't think that's gonna make the rock move. Selena whirls around. Emerging on the other side of the landing was Sam. He was covered head to toe in gray dust and blood leaked. She lifted her chin. I've been shouting for you. Sam shrugs and saunters over to her. I figured you could wait a few minutes given that I saved the day and all. His brow rose high on his ash-covered face. Some hero, she gestured to the ruins of the tower around them. I've never seen such sloppy work. Sam smiles at her and his brown eyes turned golden in the dawn. It was such a Sam look, that little twinkle of mischief and a hint of exasperation, the kindness that would always make him a better person than she was. Before she knew what she was doing, she throws her arms around him and holds him close. He stiffens, but after a heartbeat, his arms came around her. She breathed him in, the smell of his sweat, the tang of the dust, the rock, and the metallic odor of his blood. Sam rested his cheek on her head, and she couldn't remember, honestly could not recall, the last time anyone had held her. She wanted to curl into his warmth, and like for one moment, she didn't have to worry about anyone or anybody. Sam cleared his throat and said, come on, Sardothian. If you're done liberating slaves and destroying pirate cities, let's go home. And that is the end of The Assassin and Pirate Lord. The next one we're gonna do tonight is The Assassin and the Healer. This is 2 point of views, okay? This is important because the book becomes multiple POV, like the series. So it's not just Selena, it's multiple people. So we open with Irene Towers. And I know some people probably call her Ren, but I've never heard anyone say her name, and so I'm going to be calling her Irene. So Irene is 19. She has golden brown skin, rich curly brown hair with flashes of gold. Irene is considered a beautiful woman, especially accented with her golden brown eyes. I want everyone to hear me say that she has golden brown skin. Very important to me that everybody knows the skin color of these characters. We open with a POV from Irene. Irene is a 19-year-old woman who is a barmaid at a small bar in Inish Port. The bar is called the White Pig. She is eyeing a weird stranger woman who is slender built and entirely cloaked. She has not been able to see the stranger's face, and the stranger sits alone at the bar. The inn, the White Pig, is incredibly filthy, and sheets only get washed when there's absolutely no denying lice or fleas. This place is absolutely freaking disgusting. And sometimes the stew meat is literally whatever the dead rodents were found in the back alley. The ale mugs are cloudy, and the wine is watered down. As Irene watches Selena, who is the stranger, she is remarking about how smart the stranger is at multiple different points. She cannot stop complimenting the stranger mentally or staring in wonder at her clothes, her hair, her rich pins, like she's literally got a huge ass ruby just like on her, and the gold that she flaunts around. Then we switch to Selena's POV. Selena hated Inish and hated that nobody here knew who she was, and how her life had completely gone to hell. Her face is covered in bruises, cuts, and scabs from how horribly Arabin had beaten her as punishment for freeing the slaves. She reminds herself that freeing them was worth it, like all of the time. Like, she has to keep telling herself this, like, it was worth it, it was worth it, it was worth it. She's got mottled purple, blue, and yellow along her cheekbones, a horrible black eye, and a split open lip, which is still closing. So it's literally an open wound. Selena watches the barmaid nimbly dodge around the men who try to grope at her while never ever disrupting the tray carrying food, drinks, and plates. Quote, what a waste of swift feet, Selena thinks to herself. Good balance, intelligent, and stunning eyes. Selena wonders what kind of personal hell had driven this cunning woman to be stuck in this bar here in Inish. Selena had been fighting with many random drunks in the last 2 weeks that she had been traveling to get to Inish Port. She was spoiling for a fight, no weapons, only fists, and she didn't feel bad for the broken jaws or noses. She wanted to feel powerful, like she was still Adarlan's chosen assassin, and those moments of fighting reminded her of it. She had been flaunting her wealth around the White Pig on purpose to try to get someone to mug her so she could fight with them. Since it was her last night in town tonight, if someone was going to try something, it would be tonight. She also had contemplated never going to the Red Desert, which is where she has been sent. So she is at Inish Port because she's being sent to the Red Desert as punishment for freeing all the slaves. She contemplates never going to the Red Desert or even returning to Adarlan and starting over somewhere else. The only thing that was stopping her, however, was that Arabin would literally hunt her down to the ends of the earth, just like he had sent her and Sam to do multiple times throughout their life, to go hunt and chase down the rogue assassins that would try to quit the guild. We switch back to Irene's POV. She says something changed in the air. Last call is in 40 minutes, and something felt very wrong in the inn. She watched as the other patrons stared at Selena, and Irene has a lot of questions about this, wondering if they were waiting for her to make a move first. She considers warning the girl, but worries about losing her job, and then wonders why she even cares about her job in the first place. If she were to warn Selena, then Selena could like hurt the other patrons, and the other patrons are like very high paying like mercenary patrons, and her boss would get really mad if they just like dipped or if they got hurt and couldn't pay. So she ultimately decides against warning the stranger, who is Selena. We get Irene's backstory on page 88, which tells us how strong-willed and iron-stomached she is. She was a prodigy gifted healer blessed with no small amount of magic. Her mother had always said it wasn't right to charge people for what they had been given for free by Silva, the goddess of healing, and the only time she'd ever seen her mother falter was the day the soldiers from Aderlin surrounded their house, armed to the teeth and bearing torches and wood. They hadn't bothered to listen to why her mother explained her powers, like Irene's, had already disappeared months before, along with the rest of the magic in the land abandoned by the gods her mother had claimed. The soldiers didn't listen at all, and neither did any of their vanished gods. It was the first and only time her mother had taken a life. Irene could still see the glint of the hidden dagger in her mother's hand, and still feel the blood of the soldier on her feet. Her mother screamed at her to run, smelled the smoke of the bonfire as they burned her gifted mother alive, while Irene wept from the nearby safety of Oakwald Forest. It was from her mother that Irene inherited her iron stomach, but she'd never thought those solid nerves would wind up keeping her here, claiming this hovel as her home. It's just this moment where we find out a little bit about Irene, which is really tragic. She had to watch her mother burn alive. Just as this happens, she's so lost in thought that Mercenary is able to sneak up on her. He says, "We could use a pretty face at this table." He had slipped a broad hand around her waist. She tried to step back, but he held firm, not letting her go. She says, "I have work to do." And he goes, "You can go to work on me." Calmly, she pried the mercenary's fingers off of her waist. She says, "Last call in 40 minutes. Can I get you anything?" And then he says, "What are you doing after?" And she says, "Going home to my husband." And she flashes a ring on her finger that now passed for a wedding band that had belonged to her mother, her mother's mother, and wiped from all living memory. So she's able to get out of the situation. Selena feels insulted when none of the men try to rob her. She considers going out into town now that it's last call, and thinks about how stupid Sam would say for doing that. But Sam wasn't here. She didn't know if he was dead or alive or beaten senseless by Arabin. It was a safe bet that Sam had been punished for the role he'd played in liberating the slaves in Skulls Bay. She didn't want to think about it. Sam had become her friend, she supposed. She'd never had the luxury of friends before and never particularly wanted any. But Sam was a good contender, even if he didn't hesitate to say exactly what he thought about her plans or abilities. She goes upstairs listening for any thieves who may be waiting. She sighs and she's disappointed when she hears that there are none there. She goes into her room and bolts it shut and then pushes furniture in front of it to not save her, but to save anyone who is stupid enough to try to steal from her tonight from dying. Then after 15 minutes, she gets bored and she unbolts the door, moves the furniture, and stalks off into the night. Irene is outside with a rubbish pail. It's the last call of the night. She gets lost in her thoughts again. Someone comes up from behind her. She begins to say that they're closed for the night, but then when she turns around, she sees that it's the mercenaries from before who were touching her without her permission. They were big, hulking brute men. One blocks her path and the other grabs her and pulls her into his body, a knife to her throat. His breath is hot. He tells her to give them the big tips that the stranger had been giving her, because Selena had been popping gold coins on purpose at Irene to get other people to notice her to rob her. But I guess they decided that it'd be easier to just rob Irene instead of her. The man farthest from them was yanked into the mist with a strangled cry. The mercenary holding her whirled toward him, dragging Irene along. There was a ruffle of clothing and a thump and then silence. Then, ? The man blocking the door called nothing. The third mercenary, standing between Irene and the mist, drew his sword. Irene didn't have time to cry out in surprise or warning as a dark figure slipped from the mist and grabbed him. And essentially what's happening here is Selena is just taking them all out, one by one. Selena says the fight was over way too quickly, and it hadn't even been fun. She didn't mean to save Irene, it was just completely dumb luck that she had stumbled upon the lowlives and wanted to fight. Irene starts fussing over Selena because she had a pretty bad cut on her shoulder. Selena tells her that she really doesn't need any help and that she can take care of herself, but Irene is like, "No, I'm a healer, and who knows what the hell was on that blade. We need to get it cleaned." They go back and forth for a minute, and then Selena has this interesting moment. Irene says, "My mother was a healer and she taught me a few things. I could," she stammers. "Please let me repay you." And Selena goes, this is This is really annoying. But Selena says, you wouldn't owe me anything if you used your common sense. The girl flinched as though Selena had struck her, and she says, I'm sorry. And she goes, what are you apologizing to me for? What are you apologizing at all? Those men had it coming, but you should have been smarter. And that's annoying because it's victim blaming. It's like Irene was stupid enough, and so that's like why she got attacked. But then Selena, thank God, has a moment right after where she goes, it wasn't the girl's fault. She had to remind herself of that. She couldn't fault her at all because she didn't know how to fight back. No one had taught her. The girl puts her face in her hands, her shoulders curving inwards. Selena counts the seconds until the girl bursts into sobs, but that didn't happen. The girl just took deep breaths and says, let me clean your arm, in a very strong tone. So Selena blames Irene for getting attacked and then tells herself, oh, that's actually a really stupid thought. It's not her fault. At least that's in there, because that would have been points against Selena. Irene bandages Selena in her room upstairs, and the two start to talk about Irene and where she came from. They share a really cute moment, and Selena encourages Irene to pursue getting to the Tour Sesame. Selena says, let me give you a bit of advice. From one working girl to another, life isn't easy no matter where you are. You make the choices you think are right and then you suffer for them. So if you're gonna be miserable, you might as well go to Antica and be miserable in the shadow of the Tour Sesame. And the Tour Sesame is essentially like a huge school and practice for healers, magically gifted healers, because allegedly in Antica, which is on a different continent, there is still magic. And so the healers at the Tour Sesame practice magic there and healing. Irene should go to the Tour Sesame because that's where she was trying to go in the first place, but then she got stuck here. Irene says she doesn't have money, and Selena goes, well then just steal it. And Irene pulls back and says, I'm no thief. And then there's a roguish grin. If you want something, then go take it. And then Irene thinks, this girl wasn't like Wildfire. She was Wildfire. Deadly and uncontrollable and slightly out of her wits, which is just a cute thing. Irene notices like how fucked up Selena's face is. And she's like, you know, I could go find something for your face. Cause she's got this currently like open and like bleeding wound, and then the black eye, and then like the disgusting face bruise. And she's like, I can go find something for your face. And then Selena goes, this is supposed to be a reminder. Irene's like, for what? And Selena's like, for me. We get this montage of Selena teaching Irene how to defend herself. They do this for a couple of hours in the night, and it's going really well. However, it is cut short by the mercenaries returning. They capture Irene as she tries to flee, and Selena is completely surrounded. They tell her to drop her knives. She doesn't. They say that if she doesn't drop her knives, they're gonna freaking kill Irene. And she's there. She's just had a couple hours of training practice, okay? And she's literally got a knife to her throat. This guy's like, I'm gonna kill her. Literally, there's like blood coming out because they slashed her a tiny bit. And Selena is just staring at Irene. She's just like, and Irene is like waiting for Selena to like beat them all up. As the knife starts getting cut into her neck even farther and she's like, I'm gonna die, she does the maneuver that Selena teaches her, steps down on his foot like really hard, like the inside. And then as he stumbles, she essentially like goes, bah! And then hits him. And it's like this whole like movement combo. And then after she does that, Selena takes out the rest of like the 5 men. And then Irene is like, dude, what the hell? You just like, were gonna let me die. And Selena's like, you were fine the whole time. These guys were idiots and they didn't know how to fight. And I wanted you to have practice in a controlled environment. And Irene's like, a controlled environment? My throat is bleeding. And Selena's like, you were fine. You know what, Irene, she didn't stay mad about this for too long because she felt really proud of herself that she knew what to do. Selena tells Irene to teach this to literally every single woman that she possibly can, anyone who will listen. Before leaving town, Selena, now I'm worried that her name is Selena, and I've been saying Selena this whole time. You know what, I wouldn't be surprised. Oh my God, what if it's Selena and not Selena? I've been saying Selena this whole time. She leaves a absolutely massive wad of cash, which is coins, in a bag, on Irene's bed, and her brooch and a note. This is super cute. So she's essentially like leaving. She's getting ready to go on her little boat to the desert. The note says, for wherever you need to go and then some, the world needs more healers. Selena did this because she felt like a little tug. She felt like a little cute little tug. And she was like, I should do this. She literally leaves her all this stuff. Irene sees the money as she gets back to her room. She reads the note. She kind of like laughs to herself, and she's got this moment where she thinks, and then it says, nobody stopped Irene Towers as she took the money and walked out of the White Pig and never looked back. So Irene is off to Antica to go to the Torre Sesame. Selena is on a boat to go to the Red Desert. And we are at our next story. The Assassin and the Red Desert. My bun has slowly been falling. All right, bun freshly secured, no longer lopsided. 2 weeks later, Selena is finally in the Red Desert. She's nearly to the Silent Assassins and the Mute Master, and this is her punishment for freeing the slaves, and this is where we learn a little bit more about like why she even has to go to the Red Desert in the first place. Her punishment for freeing the slaves not only was a absolutely brutal beating from Arabin, but also because she needs to go get retrained. So Arabin is sending her to the Mute Master, who is in the Red Desert at the Suisset. Gosh, I don't know how to say it. Always in italics. Okay, Sessizsuikast, Seekist or something. I'm really sorry, that's so botched. The heat is so intolerable and she was so thirsty. She's about to camp for the night when she finally crested a dune and saw the keep. She walks through the fortress and there's just literally water everywhere. So like think you're walking in this beautiful marble building and along the sides of the walkways is just like water, and it's like coming down from the walls and there's pillars everywhere and you're just in this gorgeous like oasis. There's tropical plants all over. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous room with just water everywhere. And it takes her a lot of restraint to not drink the water because it wasn't offered to her. She thought that this was a test, but it wasn't. And she could have totally, like we find out later, she could have just like bent down and like drank some of the water, but she didn't. They lead her to the Mute Master and then he just like looks at her. Then she sees him, the Mute Master. She had expected him to be ancient, but he seemed to be only around 50. She kept her chin held high as they approached him, following the tile to the floor. She couldn't tell if the Mute Master's skin had always been that tan or if it was from the sun. He smiled slightly. He'd probably been handsome in his youth. Sweat oozed down Selena's spine. Though the master had no visible weapons, 2 servants fanning him with palm leaves were armed to the teeth. Her escort stopped a safe distance from the master and Selena did the same. When she raised herself, she removed the hood over her hair and her mask. She was sure it was a mess and completely disgustingly greasy after 2 weeks in the desert with no water to bathe in. The master looked her up and down and then nodded. She knew that the master wouldn't say anything. His self-imposed silence was well known. So he was like purposefully mute, which is why everybody called him the Mute Master. She had to get a letter of approval from the master in order to return back to Arabin, and he had only given her a month to do this. Thank you for granting me an audience, Master of the Silent Assassin. She put a hand over her heart and drops on both knees. I am Selena Sardothian, protege of Arabin Hamel, king of Northern Assassins. She added Northern, even though that's not his title, because she didn't want to offend the Mute Master. My master sent me here to beseech you to train me. And then she chafes at the words as they come out of her mouth. Train her? She lowered her head to the master, wouldn't see the ire on her face. I am yours. She tilts her palms face up in supplication, and he does nothing. A dry finger tilts her chin up, and Selena found herself staring into the sea green eyes of the master. She didn't dare move. With one movement, he could snap her neck. This was a test of trust. A twinge of guilt went through her as she wondered if Sam had healed. She had finally calmed her thundering heart as the master released her face and stepped back. He motioned with a hand for her to rise, which she did. The master gave her a crooked smile. She would have echoed the expression, but an instant later, he snapped his fingers, triggering the men to attack. She takes them down easily. And then a woman named Ansel walks in. Ansel's like, all right, he'll train you. We're gonna start tomorrow at dawn and I'm gonna show you to your rooms. When Selena meets Ansel, she literally says that she's like the most beautiful woman she's ever seen in her life. Ansel is slightly taller than Selena and has medium length wine red hair and mahogany eyes, highlighted by a splattering of freckles across the bridge of her nose and cheeks with a devilish grin. She has a very full, laughing mouth and deceptively slim arms that hide rock-hard muscle. She is often seen wearing ornate armor, which she's seen in this scene wearing this, featuring engraved wolves. Even in the heat of the Red Desert, she's always wearing this armor. The right shoulder is fashioned into a snarling wolf's head, and her helmet into a wolf punched over the nose guard, similar to the wolf's head molded on the pommel of her sword. On anybody else, the armor would have looked flamboyant and ridiculous, but on Ansel, it made her look only even more striking. So that's how she sees Ansel for the first time. We find out that Ansel and Selena are gonna be roommates. Selena sees a book. Okay, as she's walking to her chambers, Selena glimpsed the cover. The title was in a scrawling, strange script that she did not recognize. And the book has like very interesting scrawled writing all over it. She goes to take a bath before dinner, and then after her bath, she climbs into bed, gets cozy to take a nap, and then she dreams a memory of Arabin. And this memory is really important, so I want everybody to listen, okay? She'd never seen Arabin so angry. It was scaring the hell out of her. He didn't yell and he didn't curse. He just went very still and very quiet. The only signs of his rage were his silver eyes glittering with deadly calm. She tried not to flinch in her chair as he stood from the wooden desk. Sam, seated beside her, sucked in a breath. She couldn't speak. If she started talking, her voice would betray her, and she couldn't endure that kind of humiliation. "Do you know how much money you've cost me?" Arabin asks her softly. Selena began sweating. It was worth it, she told herself. Freeing those 200 slaves was worth it, no matter what was about to happen, and she would do it again. "It's not her fault," Sam cut in, and she flashed him a warning glare. "We both thought it was." "Don't lie to me, Sam Cortland," Arabin growled. "The only way you would have become involved in this is because she decided to do it, and it was either let her die trying or help her." Sam opened his mouth to object, but Arabin silenced him with a sharp whistle through his teeth. His doors opened, and Wesley, Arabin's bodyguard, peered in. Arabin kept his eyes on Selena and said, "Get Turn, Mullen, and Harding." That was not a good sign. She kept her face neutral, though, as Arabin continued watching her, and neither her nor Sam spoke in the long minutes that passed. At last, the assassins, all men, all cut from muscle and armed to the teeth, filed in. "Shut the door," Arabin said to Harding, the last one to enter. Then he told the others, "Hold him." Instantly, Sam was dragged out of his chair, and his arms were pinned by Turn and Mullen. Harding took a step in front of them, his fist flexing. "No," Selena breathed as she met Sam's wide-eyed stare. Arabin wouldn't be that cruel. He wouldn't make her watch as he hurt Sam. Something tight and aching built in her throat. But Selena kept her head high, even as Arabin said quietly to her, "You're not going to enjoy this. You're not going to forget this. And I don't want you to." She whipped her head to Sam, a plea for Harding to not hurt him on her lips. She sensed the blow only a heartbeat before Arabin struck her. She toppled out of her chair and didn't have time to raise herself properly before Arabin grabbed her by her collar and swung again. His fist connecting with her cheek, light and darkness reeled. Another blow. Sam began screaming something, but Arabin hit her again. She tasted blood and she didn't fight back. Didn't dare to. Sam struggled against Turn and Mullen. They held him firm, Harding putting a warning arm in front of Sam to block his path. Arabin hit her. Her ribs, her jaw, her gut, her face. Again and again and again. Careful blows. Blows meant to inflict as much pain as possible without doing permanent damage. And Sam kept roaring, shouting words she couldn't even hear over the agony. The last thing she remembered was a pang of guilt at the sight of her blood staining Arabin's exquisite carpet. And then darkness, blissful darkness, full of relief that she hadn't seen Arabin hurt Sam. She dreamt that, but it's a real moment. We're back in reality. Selena goes to dinner. She meets Mikhail, who we learn is Ansel's boyfriend, who's twice her age. She also sees the Mute Master's son, whose name is Ilias, and she remarks that he is absolutely jaw-droppingly gorgeous, but we do unfortunately find out later that he's also mute. So they have this really interesting moment where she's like trying to talk to him and he's like, "No, you can't understand me." And he's like motioning like, "No." And she's like, "What are you saying?" And he's like, "Ah." She and Ilias, the master's son, keep making like eyes at each other the entire dinner, and she's like, "I know I'm hot." We also find out during dinner that Ansel is the Mute Master's emissary to deal with the stupid local lord named Barrick, who really wants to kill all the silent assassins. Like, he really hates them. The place that they're in is called Xandria. So he is Lord Barrick of Xandria, and he wants to kill the assassin. They ask Selena about the wounds on her face and if she deserves them, and she hits them with this awesome line. "I suppose it depends on who's telling the story. If Arabin Hamill is telling the story, then yes, I suppose I did deserve it. I cost him a good deal of money, a kingdom's worth of riches probably. I was disobedient and disrespectful, and completely remorseless about what I did. If the 200 slaves that I freed are telling the story, then no, I suppose I didn't deserve it." And none of them were smiling anymore. Holy gods, Ansel whispered. Silence fell over the table. Selena resumed eating and she didn't feel like talking to them anymore after that. So we get that really cool moment, I personally think. Selena is excited to begin training with the master, only to realize that she's not. And she's actually training with Ansel, and this is a massive letdown. It's also even more of a letdown that Selena has to run. So they're in the desert, okay? And Ansel gives her these 2 huge buckets of water and like a stick essentially, and she's like, okay, well, you have to run across the entire desert with these 2 buckets and you can only drink one of them per trip, so you have to make it last. And it takes Selena a very long time to get to the next oasis. It's essentially what she does the whole day. She gets there, she rests, she's dying, not really. And then she like collapses for a little bit, and then she finally runs back and she's literally barely done in time for dinner. So they got up at dawn, and the entire day she was like running and throwing up and puking and stuff. Then she learns that she's gonna be doing this every single day. And Ansel's like, don't worry, every day you're gonna do better. And Selena's like, fuck you. At dinner she finds the master and they have this very interesting like mute shenanigans where she's like, I wanted to train with you, and he's like, and she's like, no, you, I want to train with you, and he's like, not yet. She's like, why, like when? And he's like, I don't know. We find out that she's getting attached to Sam like even more. This entire time she has like a lot of really cute moments where she just remembers Sam. She is back in bed and she says with nothing else to distract her, Selena eventually returns to thinking about Sam. Even weeks later, she had no idea how she had become so attached to him, and she couldn't remember what he was shouting as Arobin beat her, and why Arobin had thought he'd need 3 seasoned assassins to restrain him. Which is just cute. I'm sorry. I love it. Ansel was right. Selena hated to admit it about her running farther every day, and she was. She was running farther every day. She was running faster. She was improving. Selena remarks about how it's less vicious here and how everyone is exceptionally trained but no one is abused, and how interesting and weird she thinks that is. She's like, oh, you guys are all good and none of you get beat or cut open by your master? That's crazy, because that's not what I went through. 5 nights in, Lord Barrick attacks, and Selena's like, oh, so we're gonna go kill them all. And Ansel's like, no, we're not gonna do that, just grab a bow. So they grab a bow, and then Selena pieces together that they're actually gonna launch flaming arrows into the desert. And there's this huge like oil line around the keep, and they all just like fire arrows at it and it goes up in flames, and then it burns any of the men who are on it. It's a very wide line. I made it sound narrow, it's huge, like in width and also circumference. It also like just keeps them away, so it forces them to retreat. And Ansel's like, see, wasn't that fun? And Selena was like, yeah, you know what, that actually was kind of fun. That's a huge, huge fire, dude. The next day, Ansel's told that she needs to go and meet with Lord Barrick to discuss them attacking the silent assassins, and she decides to invite Selena, and Selena is like, but I'm gonna be wasting valuable time. And Ansel's like, well, maybe you going and doing this will show him that like you care, and maybe then he'll train you. And she's like, you know what, that's a really good idea. So it's a 2-day trip. We jump forward to the next day's night. We're like completely skipping the desert, and Selena and Ansel are talking in firelight on the dunes. Selena asks about Ansel's lands, and we get an ass load of lore. I'm gonna make it really brief. Oh good, thank God. This is where I started highlighting things. This entire time I've been having to like I took notes, but I didn't highlight or underline anything, and we finally got to the part where I started. So this is witch lore, okay? We're gonna call this the witch lore, okay. Are your lands as cursed as they claim? Well, the Flatlands used to be part of the Witch Kingdom, and yes, I suppose you could say that they're cursed. When the Crocan queens ruled 500 years ago, it was very beautiful. But then the 3 Iron Teeth clans destroyed it all when they overthrew the Crocan dynasty. Some witches, like the Crocans, were gifted with ethereal beauty, but the Iron Teeth clans have iron teeth, sharp as a fish's. Actually, their iron fingernails are more dangerous. Those can gut you in one swipe. A chill went down Selena's spine. But then the Iron Teeth clans destroyed the kingdom. They say the last Crocan queen cast a spell that turned the land against any that flew under the banners of Iron Teeth so that no crops would grow. Animals withered up and died. But ever since all the Iron Teeth left, the land has been fertile. Selena asks if she's ever seen any of the witches, and we get this story about how when Ansel was little, she was friends with this girl named Maddie, and her and Maddie went to explore an old witch tower. Plot twist, it wasn't empty. Ansel watched Maddie literally be eaten alive by an iron tooth witch. That was cute. It kept Selena up all night and she couldn't fall asleep. We skip again to the following day. Selena thinks she's gonna go and meet with Lord Beric with Ansel, but she couldn't have been more wrong, actually, because Ansel dismisses her and Selena's like upset. But then we find out Selena gets to go shopping, which is her favorite thing to do because she's incredibly materialistic. So she's not sad for too long. We literally, I'm not even kidding you, 5.5 pages of her looking through different stalls before we get to the next major plot point, which is cute. I personally enjoyed reading it. I'm not complaining at all. I liked it. Am I going to recant you about the shoes that she liked that she didn't buy, or the purses, or the dresses and the trousers? Absolutely not. She eventually finds this stall with this guy, and he's like old, okay? But we find out that there is more to him than meets the eye. She was about to turn and walk back to the vendor, a shoe vendor who we skipped, when she saw something glistening in the shadows between an archway. There was hired guards around the wagon, and a tall, lean man stood behind the table. What was on his table that knocked the breath from her, which is spider silk. So spider silk is this incredibly strong material, but it's very like flexible, and it only comes from Stygian spiders, which are like this larger than horses and bears, and they spin it. But in order to get it from the Rune Mountains, you have to like give them something important to you. So usually they'll ask for years of your life. This merchant did that. He gave up half of his life in order to get like 10,000 yards of spider silk because he wanted to sell it and grow his fortune. And he thought they were gonna take the last 50 years of his life, but instead they took the first 50 years of his life. So this guy is 25 years old, but he looks over 50. He's like, but if I can kill the spider that I did the deal with, I'll get all my years back. What do you say, assassin? And she's like, what do you mean I'm an assassin? He's like, you literally have 2 huge daggers and you're a tiny girl in a market alone. And I know that the silent assassins are here. You happen to know also what spider silk is? Like, clearly you speak like a noble from Aderlin. And she's like, okay, way to read me like a book. Well, I am like the best assassin in Aderlin. And he's like, I knew it. So will you take my quest? And she's like, I'll think about it, but I'm not gonna be back in Aderlin for like a while. Take this tiny square of spider silk to remember me by, and maybe come and do my quest, essentially. So she gets like a little side quest, and she's incredibly excited about the tiny little piece of spider silk because it's worth more than like 10 years of her life. And so she takes it and she folds it up into a little thing and sticks it away. And then we get a little cute piece of information. He goes, are you here to spy for Lord Beric? Selena did her best to quell her surprise. Pardon me? The merchant shrugs, glancing at the towering palace. I heard from a city guard that strange dealings go on between Beric and some of the silent assassins. Perhaps, was all Selena said. The merchant nodded, not at all interested anymore, but Selena tucked that information away for later. Were some of the silent assassins working for Beric? Perhaps that's why Ansel had insisted on keeping the meeting so secret, because the master didn't want the names of the suspected traitors getting out. So we're just gonna tuck that away for later, and we're gonna move on. And we're gonna remember that everything has a price. Okay, Selena and Ansel go to leave, but then Ansel is like being really quirky and weird, and she's like, what if we just like stole some horses? And Selena's like, what the hell? And then she opens a barn and she's like, but these aren't just any horses, these are Asterian horses. And we learn that Asterian approves, and also that Asterian horses are like bigger, stronger, faster, and like more magical than other horses. And they're huge. They're like legendary horses, and one horse is like worth, in today's money, like millions of dollars. Okay, so they're like incredibly valuable, and they were just given to Lord Beric. And she's like, yeah, you know what? Fuck Lord Beric, let's steal his horses. And let's take the fast way back. So they take the fast way back, and Selena's horse is named Cassida. K-A-S-I-D-A. She has this cute moment where they're like riding through the dunes, running away from the guards who are charging after them on non-Asterian horses. And she like throws her arms back and she starts like laughing. And she's like, ha 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 ha. Like, Selena's definitely an adrenaline junkie. But then she gets a little nervous because they come up on this place called the Cleaver, which is a terrifying 30-foot cliff in distance, not height. It's much farther down. Very far, but it's like 30 feet across. And they're running for a very narrow, like barely big enough for the horse. And Ansel has led both of them right down this. And Selena sees that they're gonna like run out of ground. And she's like, there's no way we're gonna live. And she like literally prepares to die because she's like, if I stop this horse, we're just gonna slide off. So the only thing I can do is just full steam ahead. And she watches Ansel go over, like soar through the air like she's literally made of wind herself and just barely land with inches to spare on the other side. And Selena just holds her breath and does the exact same thing, just barely makes it, and all of the losers who aren't on Asterian horses have to stop. And I think one of them falls off the cliff. The night before they get back, they have this really cute moment where they're like camping on the dunes. Selena and Ansel are like laying right next to each other, kind of like, think like this. So like this is Selena and this is her head and her feet, and then Ansel's like right here, and they're like laying like this, like right next to each other. They're having a cute moment. Ansel comes out about how she lied about where she came from. I didn't really go over this because it's not really that important, but essentially she lied to the Mute Master and Selena about like why she was there. She said that she was sent there by her father to get trained by the master and like network, and she's Ansel of Briarcliff, and Briarcliff is like a location back in Aurelia. It's really sad. The pages 180 and 181, like if you want to read it for yourself, but it's really, really depressing. It's literally talking about her father literally like begged on his knees, and Lord Locke like slaughtered them. He made her father watch them kill his children, and then he finally killed him, and Ansel was able to make it out. She says, I've been here training ever since. One day, I want to return back to Briarcliff and take back what is mine. I'll march into High King Locke's hall and repay him for what he did to my family, and with my father's sword. This sword will end his life, because the sword is all I have left of him. Selena didn't even realize she was crying until she tried to take a breath, and she said, saying that she's sorry wouldn't even feel adequate. Ansel turned to look at her, and her eyes were lined with silver. She traced Selena's cheekbone where the bruises had once been. Where do men find it in themselves to do such monstrous things? This is so cute. Where do men find it in themselves to do such monstrous things, and how do they find it acceptable? Selena says, we'll make them pay for it in the end. We'll see to it that they all pay. And then they both look away from each other where they've been gazing into each other's eyes. And then they look at the stars. And Ansel goes, yes. Yes, we will. So they make this cute little pact. I love that moment. When they got back, of course, they were in trouble. After everything that Ansel had opened up to her about, Selena is sitting there knowing that she's gonna be leaving in 3 weeks anyways, and she's like, Ansel needs to be here, Ansel has to be here, but I can get sent away. And so she actually like sacrifices herself, and the master, when he's like looking at them, she's like, I did it. It was my idea. I wanted to steal the horses. They were pretty and I like pretty things. Which isn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. And after he like looks at them for a little bit, he looks at Ansel and he like motions to her, and Ansel like looks at Selena in surprise, and she's like, he's gonna start training you. And what happened was the master knew that it was Ansel's idea and that Selena lied to protect Ansel. And so he decides that Selena is worthy and he's going to train her. A lot of time passes. We get a montage for the next like almost 3 weeks. Selena is being trained by the master all day, every single day. One of the nights, she actually almost kisses Ilias. They have this like interesting moment where he like caresses her face, and he's like tall and super handsome and super hot. Doesn't speak. She's never heard his voice. But he like tries to kiss her, and she like pulls back because Ilias wasn't Sam. Interesting. And then also, her and Ansel get in a fight during this time. They ignore each other for about a week, and then they make up. During the makeup moment, they both tell each other how happy they are to have found each other and how they would do a lot of bad things for the other to help them out of certain situations. And Selena realizes that she might have just found her real friend. Ansel brings them in some wine, and they're like making up. Ansel's like, I love you. Selena's like, I love you too, but they don't actually say that. But like, that's what is coming across. And Ansel goes, because you know, Selena's time is coming to an end there. She's about to leave. She still hasn't gotten the letter of approval, by the way, but she's running out of time very quickly. I have a lot of friends here, Ansel says, but you're the first true friend I've had, and I'll be sorry to see you go. Selena's like, I still have 5 days. Ansel flicked her eyes to the door again. What was she nervous about? And she says, just try to remember me fondly, will you? Selena goes, I'll try, but it might be hard. She lets out a laugh and takes 2 goblets from the table beneath the window. She handed one to Selena, and Ansel lifted her copper goblet to making amends and fond memories. And Selena goes to being the most fearsome, imposing girls the world has ever seen. As she swallowed a large mouthful of wine, she had 2 thoughts. First was that Ansel's eyes were now filled with unmasked sorrow. The second, which explained the first, was that the wine tasted strange. So, Ansel poisoned Selena. That's not weird. I do that to all my friends often. Selena awakens in the desert with her horse and all of her items and a letter of approval from the Mute Master. But she is confused because she had 5 days left and the master hadn't told her that she was like done, or that he liked her. And so she takes out the letter to open it, but then she realizes that if she opens it and it is actually a letter of approval, that Arabin will definitely accuse her of tampering with the letter. Ansel explains in a letter to her that the master was going to ask her to leave early and he didn't want to embarrass her. So instead he had Ansel poison her and decided to send her away early with a letter of approval so that she wouldn't like have any awkward situations with anyone else that was there. Selena has a moment where she gets very self-critical. She thought that she had finally found a place that would be her home that wasn't cruel. That she had finally found like people who she fit in with, and realizing that this wasn't true and that they actually just wanted her to leave to the point where they just kicked her out early, like it hurt her really bad, and she actually had to like fight to keep the tears in her eyes because she was gonna start ugly crying. She finally thought that she had a friend in Ansel. She thought she had finally found somewhere that would teach her about more than death and murder, and she was wrong. She eventually makes it back to Xandria, but on her way there, she had seen like a bunch of soldiers just like being kind of quirky in the desert. She had a thought. She's like, okay, that's a lot of soldiers. It's about 200. The assassins would definitely know that they're coming and they can handle themselves without me. They've always handled themselves without me. Like, I'm not that special. She has this like humble moment. As she's walking with Cassida, her Asterian horse they gave her, through the streets and the back alleys, she suddenly starts to question why she was actually sent away. Because if they knew they were about to be attacked, they would definitely want all the help that they could get. So either they didn't need her there to help them, or they didn't know that they were getting ambushed. She tears open the bag with the letter of approval, reads it, except for that she can't because there's no words and it's a completely empty scroll of paper. So Ansel had poisoned her, kicked her out, and then lied to her, and definitely was the spy that the spider silk merchant had told her about. So she literally like tears through the desert like a shooting star on Cassida, and she reaches the keep and it's completely under siege. Like there's literally dead bodies everywhere, fire everywhere, like the place is a disaster. And Selena had to fight her way all the way to the master's room, and she walks across a dead Mikhail, who was Ansel's boyfriend, who was twice her age. And I wrote in parentheses, Sag. And then a very injured Ilias, the master's son. Farther up the stairs on the dais, we see the mute master on the floor, and he's like staring at Selena, like pointing with the only effort, like literally the only energy that he can. He's like pointing at his son. He wants Selena to save his son. Ansel is standing there with her sword directly over her head, giving a villain's monologue to the mute master. They have a really heartbreaking moment. Ansel is going to kill the mute master to get the favor of Lord Beric, who will give her an army to take back to her home, take back her home from Lord Locke, which is again the entire reason that she's been there. And she felt like this was the only way for her to do this, and she's like crying. Like her and Selena, they like actually connected. Like Selena is literally like standing there crying, like, don't make me kill you, please don't make me kill you. And she gives Ansel so many chances. They'll fight, and then Selena will like win and trap Ansel, and then Ansel will like get out, and then they'll fight, and then she'll trap Ansel again. And Selena's heart is just ripping to pieces because she had never had a friend that was a girl before, and not one that she had actually shared personal secrets with, because Selena wasn't allowed to let anyone know who she was. Like she had never told anything about herself to anyone, never had anybody trust themselves with anything real about them. And this was the very first time in her life she'd ever done this. It was awful. It was like everything she had bared for another person just completely ripped to shreds. She wins. Like she's just beating Ansel left and right. Ansel's not that good. Selena's like, you have 20 minutes to get out, because at the 20th minute, I'm gonna fire my bow at you and you're gonna die. And so Ansel leaves. She helps the mute master. She gets him an antidote. They find out Ilias is alive. He's very wounded. Mikhail is definitely dead. Ansel was already a dark blur in the distance. Heasley, who is the name of Ansel's Asterian horse, is galloping towards Briar Cliff. Selena draws her bow. The bowstring moaned as it was pulled back. In the silence of the fortress, the bowstring twanged like a mournful harp. The arrow soared, turning relentlessly. The red dunes passed beneath in a blur, closing the distance. It would be a quick, bloody death. Heasley's tail flicked to the side as the arrow buried itself in the sand just inches behind its rear hooves. Ansel didn't look over her shoulder. She kept riding and did not stop. Selena lowered her bow and watched until Ansel disappeared over the horizon. One arrow that had been her promise. But she'd also promised Ansel that she had 20 minutes to get out. Selena had fired after 21. So she lets Ansel go. I think we've seen Selena doesn't like to kill people. She actually like avoids it at all costs unless she absolutely has to. So I do think that she did kill some of the guards, the bad ones that were in the keep on her way in, because she had to fight her way in. And it doesn't say specifically that she only knocks them out, because I marked all of the points in the book where it says that specifically. She like does not want to kill, and this specific moment where she's really met like a twin flame, she lets Ansel go. When she goes back to the Silent Assassins the next day, like after everyone has had a very horrible night of mourning and counting the dead, she was called into the master's office. He gives her a letter of recommendation to Arabin, and then he also gives her an absolute crap load of money, like a lot of money. 3 entire trunkfuls of like gold, like huge trunkfuls that needed 4 people each to carry them, like huge. He also tells her to tell Arabin that the Silent Assassins don't abuse their own people. So he's like, take this money for saving my life. He was happy that she let Ansel go. Also, he talks. I didn't write that down. He talks. So he wasn't actually mute. He literally is like, yeah, everybody thinks I'm like mute, but I'm not actually. He literally is like, yeah, I just don't really have a lot to say. Sometimes I just forget to use words. So he's like not actually like taking a vow or anything. He just like really doesn't like to talk. And so they speak. He gives her the money. The letter tells her to tell Arabin that she will always have a home with the Silent Assassins, which I think is really cute. It's a really good end to this story. And then we get to the next story. And this is actually one of my favorite, if not my favorite part of this. And you can tell because I went crazy. So The Assassin in the Underworld, this is our 4th novella. The one after this is The Assassin in the Empire. I have a lot to read you, so this video is long, but we've gotten the backstory of like her adventures or misadventures. We're really jumping into like her actual life. So there's a lot. So we also have a lot of abuse in this section, a lot of emotional manipulation and gaslighting and physical abuse. So if you need to like tap out, this section is heavy and it's also very complicated, so do your best to stick with me. I literally like wrote that in the notes. I also say I'd personally rather call this novella The Assassin and the Abusive, Manipulative, Perverted King of Assassins. The cavernous entrance hall of the Assassin's Keep was silent as Selena Sardathian stalked across the marble floor. She had a rain-sodden cloak, and the guard said nothing as she walked in. The doors to his office on the other end of the hall were completely shut, but she knew that he was in there. Wesley, his bodyguard, stood watch outside, dark eyes unreadable as Selena strode towards him. She also had no doubt that Arabin had eyes at every gate on the city, and the moment she had stepped into Rifthold, which is the major city in Aderlin, where the king lives, he had been alerted that she had returned at last. It had been 3 months since the night Arabin had beaten her unconscious, punishment for ruining his trade agreement with Captain Rolfe. She couldn't wait to see the look on his face when she gave it to him, not to mention when she told him about the 3 chunks of gold she'd brought with her. She'd explained that her debt to him was now repaid and that she was going to walk out of the keep and move into the new apartment that she had also just purchased. She was free of him. During this time, she's really let her resentment pile up. She's like over it. She's had so much time to practice what she's gonna say to him. The King of the Assassins was seated at his ornate desk, poring over the stack of papers before him. Without so much as a hello, Selena strode right up to the desk and nonchalantly tossed the letter onto the shining surface. She opened her mouth, words were about to burst out of her, but Arabin just lifted a finger, smiling faintly, and then returned to his papers. Selena froze. He made a wave with his hand for her to sit. Selena blinked once, twice. He didn't look up at her at all. He just kept reading. The message was obviously clear. She was to wait until he was ready. Until then, even if she screamed until her lungs burst, he would not acknowledge her existence. And so she sat. Arabin read 3 other documents before even getting to the Mute Master's letter. As he read it, she could only think of the last time she'd sat in this chair, and then she has a flashback to her getting absolutely pummeled by Arabin and Sam screaming at Arabin. Finally deigns to acknowledge her existence and goes, "I thought you'd be Tanner." She almost laughs and goes, "Head to toe close to avoid the sun." That's all she says. Her words were quieter and weaker than she wanted them to be. The first words she'd spoken to him since he'd beaten her into oblivion. "Ah," he says, long, elegant fingers twisting a golden ring around his finger. She sucked in a breath through her nose, remembering all that she had been burning to say to him these last few months. More than 8 years with him, finished with a string of words and a mountain of gold. She braced herself to begin, but Arobin says, I'm sorry. If I could take back that night, Selena, I would. He leans over the edge of the desk. I'm sorry, he repeats. Every day since you've left, I have gone to the Temple of Kiva to pray for forgiveness. His words were so raw. Was it possible that he actually regretted it? And I want you to know, I'm not reading you the entire book. I'm reading you specific, like, highlighted sections to make it make sense. I shouldn't have let my temper get the best of me, and I shouldn't have sent you away. And she just goes, then why didn't you retrieve me? Arobin's eyes narrowed with a wince. With the time it would take my messengers to track you down, you would have probably already been on your way back. She just like clenches her jaw. In her head, she's like, that's such an easy excuse. And he goes, allow me to make it up to you. He sank to one knee before her, his face near level with hers. She had forgotten how tall he was. He extended the gift to her, a small box. The box itself was a work of art inlaid with mother of pearl. But she kept her face blank as he flipped it open. An emerald and gold brooch glittered in the gray afternoon light. It was stunning, the work of a craftsman. She instantly knew what dresses and tunics it would best complement. For you, the first of many. She braced herself as he lifted a hand, carefully bringing it to her face, which is just so sad. Like, he's beat her so much that he like lifts his hand up to her face and she like, I'm sorry, he whispers again. And then she goes in her head, father, brother, lover. He'd never really declared himself any of them, certainly not the lover part. Though if Selena had been another sort of girl, which she's talking about like a courtesan or courtesan, and if she had been raised differently, perhaps it might have come to that. He loved her like family, yet he put her in the most dangerous positions. He nurtured her and educated her, but he also obliterated her innocence the first time he'd make her end a life. He'd given her everything, but he also took everything away. She could no sooner sort out her feelings toward the king of the assassins than she could count the stars in the sky. What we're learning, if you're unfamiliar with abuse, is essentially Arobin is incredibly narcissistic and also like a complete actual psychopath. Gaslights her constantly, builds her up and tears her down, purposefully does things to hurt her, and then he's like, now come give me a hug. Like, it's very, very abusive. And I do want to make an entire video just analyzing Selena's relationship with Arobin and the abuse that she endures, because he's essentially just been grooming her. The part where it talks about lover, like Selena, barely 17, like she turned 17, I believe, in the desert with the assassins, and Arobin is like in his 30s. And he's known her since she was younger than 8. So it's just very horrible, terrifying grooming, gaslighting, physical abuse, and emotional abuse. He tells her he has another gift for her. He says Benzo Donoval is coming to Rift Hold. She'd heard of Donoval. He was an immensely powerful businessman from Melisande. Here is the interesting part. I'm just gonna lay it out for you. Donoval is a slave trader who wants to petition the king of Adarlan to give him the resources to build him a road so that he can better trade slaves and get them in and out of Adarlan. And Adarlan had only recently been, again, the Empire, recently been importing slaves. So it's like a new thing. Arobin is like, listen, the slave thing clearly bothered you. Let me give you this contract to kill a major slave kingpin. She's like, maybe he really does feel bad. Like, if he's offering me this, he had picked this mission just for her to prove that he understood how much Skull's Bay hurt her. Also, just another character we have to introduce real quick is Leifter, L-E-I-G-H-F-E-R, or Leifer. So Leifer is Donoval's ex-wife, and she's the one who has given Arobin this contract because she wants her husband dead. She's against slavery, and her husband is this evil slave trader. So she wants him dead. She says that in her head, to take this mission wouldn't just be about killing, it would also be about helping others. How many lives would be destroyed if she didn't kill Donoval? So what we're learning is that Selena really doesn't like to kill people unless it benefits a greater number of people than she's killing. He brushes the hair back from her face, and they're like really close together. And he goes, I missed you. He opened his arms to her, but she doesn't move in to embrace him. While she had no regrets about freeing those 200 slaves, she had betrayed Arobin in doing it. Perhaps hurting her had been his way of coping. So now she's rationalizing his abusive behavior because it's the only thing that she can do. It's just the trauma. And even though there was no excuse in the world for Arobin hurting her, Arobin was all she had. The history that lay between them, dark, twisted, and full of secrets, was forged by more than just gold. And if she left him, if she paid off her debts and never saw him again, ... She took steps back. and Arobin lowered his arms. She says, I will think about Donoval. She always took time to consider her missions, and Arobin had always encouraged her in that from the start. Which is him like giving her the illusion of having freedom, but she doesn't actually have freedom. I'm sorry, he says again. She gives him a long look before she leaves. Okay, then we get this moment. She goes upstairs and she's realizing that there's like a party going on, which is kind of interesting. She realizes that Arobin had been up in this party and had been told that she was back in town. So he went to his office to pretend he was busy, all to manipulate Selena. So he is the worst. He's actually horrible. He literally did all of that power move to make her feel small and take the power away from her and make her lose her words and shift the ball back into his court. Just disgusting. But then, as she's walking up the stairs, from out of a room steps Sam Cortland. No missing limbs, no limp, no indication of anything haunting him. His chestnut hair was longer and suited him. He was tan, gloriously tan, as if he'd spent the entire summer basking in the sun. Hadn't Arobin punished him at all? You're back, Sam said. Obviously, she lifted her chin and put her hands in her pockets. How was the desert? There wasn't a scratch on him. Hot, she said. Sam let out a chuckle. And it wasn't that she was mad about him for being uninjured, but she was actually so relieved that she could have vomited. She just never imagined that seeing him this way would feel so strange. But after what had happened with Ansel, she honestly didn't feel like she could even trust Sam again. How is it possible that she could have so many questions and so little to say? So they've been like standing there not really saying anything. And she's like having this moment in her head where she's like, what the fuck? He's completely okay. Sam's eyes slipped from her face to her neck, his brows drawing together for a heartbeat as he saw the thin new scar. What happened? Someone held a sword to my throat. His eyes darkened. And I'm gonna try to act this out like how I read it in my head. He's like, and he's tall. Sam is like 6'3", okay? Huge. She's 5'7". He takes a step towards her. Are you hurt? It took her a moment to realize that his imagination had probably taken him to a far worse place when she said someone held a blade to her throat. No, she said, not like that. Then like what? He goes, taking another step towards her. He was now looking more closely at her, at the almost invisible white line along her cheek, another gift from Ansel. Like none of your business, that's what? She retorted. Tell me what happened. He grits out. After so many years of treating him awfully, she didn't know how to slide back into that newfound respect and camaraderie they'd discovered. Why should I tell you anything? Because, he hissed, taking another step closer. The last time I saw you, Selena, you were unconscious on Arobin's carpet and so bloodied that I couldn't see your damn face. He was close enough that she could touch him now. Rain continued beating against the windows. Tell me, he ordered. Well, she says said, but like he's clearly like ordering her. Then Selena remembers that what Sam had been screaming at Arobin when he was beating her was, I'll kill you. So he had been screaming that. She was getting beat like into oblivion, and he's literally screaming, I'll kill you, while Arobin had to have his 3 literal strongest assassins hold him back, 3 of them, to hold back this 6'3" freaking monster man who's gonna kill Arobin. Sam had screamed it at the King of the Assassins as the King of the Assassins beat her. He'd roared it. In those horrible minutes, whatever bond had sprung up between her and Sam hadn't broken. He'd switched loyalties. He'd chosen to stand by her, fight for her, and that made him different from Ansel. A half smile tugged on her lips. She'd missed him. Seeing the expression on her face, he gave her a bewildered grin. She swallowed, feeling the words bubbling up. I missed you, is what she was gonna say. But then a door to the drawing room opened and this girl named Lysandra walks out. And listen, we don't like Lysandra. She is a courtesan, essentially, that Arobin has just been funneling money into. She's the exact same age as Selena. She's 17. And her bidding is coming up. What's a bidding? Ashley, what's a bidding? Let me tell you. A bidding is when courtesans have someone buys their V card. So her bidding's coming up. She's just with Sam. She's like all over Sam. Sam has apparently been with her for like the last few months, and she's all over him. She's like hugging her arm through his arm, and she's like, oh my gosh, Selena, you're back. Wow, we didn't miss you at all, actually. I don't think Sam even likes you. That's not what she says. But Lysandra really fucks with Selena, like on purpose. Selena eventually leaves. She was literally about to like open her heart and soul to Sam for a minute and like be kind of real with him. And then Lysandra shows up and ruins it. And Selena just starts giving like one-word answers to everything. And she's just like, whatever. Selena's like, enjoy your quality company. And Sam's like, Selena. And then she like walks away. And we are gonna finish this tomorrow for me in 1 second for you, because I'm exhausted and it's 1:30 in the morning and my hair is falling out all over the place. I don't want to be wearing these anymore. So I'm gonna finish this tomorrow with you in just a minute. We are back. Quick update. It's been 5 or 6 days since we filmed the last part of this. I just edited everything you just saw before this to see how I felt about how we were moving through it. And I have learned I need to stop trying to go off memory and just actually read my freaking notes. Also, we are 38 and a half weeks pregnant as of right now. Because of my pregnancy, half of my back molar just fell off. So I gotta go get that fixed tomorrow. Okay, let's jump back in. Also, I realized I want to give more seriousness to the serious scenes instead of just acting silly goofy. Okay. As Selena is walking off at the end of this scene, she thinks to herself about how because of Lysandra's bidding coming up, her virginity is absolutely unquestionable. It has to be. But that doesn't mean that there weren't things that she could have spent the summer doing with Sam that did not involve what she was losing at her bidding. Selena's a little jealous. Feeling sick, furious, and small, Selena reached the bedroom, slammed the door hard enough to rattle the rain-splattered windows. Selena wakes up the next day to another Arabin present. She spends the morning preening herself, grooming herself, and then she decides that that day is pamper day. So she hasn't gotten to go get her hair done, her nails done. But when I say hair, I mean like literally all hair, like eyebrows, legs, everything. So she goes to have a pamper day and we get a montage over like 12 pages of her stylists like being so appalled at how unkept she was. And they're also excited to see her because she went there like every single week and then all of a sudden she just stopped going. So they were a little worried. Through Selena's thoughts during the scene, we learn that Melisande is a place full of master tinkerers. Then she also thinks about Sam's unwavering loyalty or lack thereof and starts to resent him. And she thinks, how long had it taken for her to be sent off to the desert for him to abandon the idea of her and turn his thoughts to Lysandra? She thinks to herself that things were better when she hated him. The next day, Arabin gifts her a fancy black spy suit made by a Melisandrian tinkerer. I want you to think about Assassin's Creed. If you've never seen those kinds of outfits, it kind of looks something like this. She's got blades hidden in her gloves, in her boots, in her side leathers. They're like hidden in her, like along her thigh, underneath her arms. So there's like a million different ways for her to kill someone in this suit. And also the boots that are a part of her suit have very special like anti-slip coating on the bottom of them. So it's essentially designed to be like a murder suit. And she's being very careful. She's kind of moving awkwardly. She doesn't know how to totally control it yet. And she doesn't want to flick a blade out and accidentally impale herself or someone else. Arabin gives her this suit completely for free as a gift to her. When she asks if Sam is also going to get a suit, he says, of course, the best for my bests. And she's like, wow, that's really nice of you to just give Sam a suit. And he goes, oh, I'm not giving it to him, Sam. I'm tacking on more debt. Sam's buying his own suit. After the fitting, Arabin gives her a kiss on her head and says just how happy he is to have her back. After he's out of earshot, she asks the tinkerer if he can sew a small patch of spider silk into the suit. He is very surprised by this, but agrees. And then she says, as long as it covers the heart. After her fitting, we get a really juicy Sam and Selena scene. I'm sorry, I just love them so much. She runs into Sam on her way out of the fitting room. He admires her suit. She makes to put her hand on her hip because she's always like, when she walks into a room, she's like, oh, hello, or she's constantly faces that are like, huh, you know, she like she knows she's cute, or oh, you know, like that kind of stuff, right? So she goes to like do her hand on her hip thing and then immediately stops because she's like, there's a blade in my glove and I don't want to stab myself in the hip. Fancy, Sam said. She made to put her hands on her hips and then she stopped in case she skewered herself. Another gift? Is there a problem if it is? Sam doesn't know about the suits, by the way, yet. He hasn't been given his by Airpin. Sam crossed his arms and then it says, his white shirt was tight enough that she could see muscles shifting beneath. I'm a little surprised that you're accepting his gifts. How can you forgive him for what he did? Forgive him? I'm not the one cavorting with Lysandra, attending luncheons and doing whatever the hell else you spent the summer doing. Sam let out a growl. You think I actually enjoy any of that? You weren't the one sent off to the Red Desert. Believe me, I would have rather been thousands of miles away. Well, I don't believe you. How can I believe anything you say? His brows furrowed. What are you talking about? She goes, nothing, none of your business. I don't want to talk about this, and I don't particularly want to talk to you, Sam Cortland. Then go ahead, he breathed. Go crawl back to Arabin's study and talk to him. Let him buy you presents, pet your hair, and offer you the best paying missions that we get. It won't take him long to figure out your price for forgiveness. Not when, and then she interrupts him. Don't you dare judge me. Do not say one more word. A muscle feathered in his jaw. That's this, by the way. That's a feathering. So I'm getting really into this. I just want you guys to understand how I read this in my head, the intensity. Fine with me. You wouldn't listen anyway. Selena Sardothian and Arabin Hamill, just the two of you, inseparable until the end of the world. The rest of us might as well be invisible. That sounds an awful lot like jealousy, especially considering that you had 3 uninterrupted months with him this summer. What happened, Did he find you lacking? Sam was in her face so quickly that she fought the urge to jump back. You know nothing about what this summer was like for me, Selena. Good. I don't particularly care. His eyes were so wide, she wondered if she'd struck him and not realized it. You want to know what price I asked for forgiving Arabin, Selena? She turned to him. Sam stood so still, he might as well have been a statue. My price was his oath that he'd never lay a hand on you again. I told him I would forgive him in exchange for that. She wished she'd been punched in the gut. It would have hurt less. Not trusting herself to keep her from falling to her knees with shame, she left and stalked down the hall. She didn't want to speak to Sam ever again. How could she even look him in the eye? He'd made Arabin swear that for her. She didn't know what words could convey the mixture of gratitude and guilt. Hating him had been so much easier, and it would have been far simpler if he'd blamed her for Arabin's punishment. That evening, she climbed into Arabin's carriage and discovered Lysandra and Sam waiting inside. Selena dared a glance at Sam as she slumped onto the bench beside him. So they're like literally sitting right next to each other. He watched her, his eyes wary, shoulders tensed, as if he expected her to launch a verbal attack right there. Did he really think she was that cruel? Then we have another cute moment. So right now they are at a opera house for a concert. Arabin, Lysandra, Sam, and Selena are all here, and it's to give Lysandra some more exposure, but also they are scoping out Donoval. He's in his own box. There were 3 seats along the balcony rail and 3 seats behind them. Lysandra, to Selena's dismay, sat next to her as Arabin and Sam took the rear seats. Selena could sense Sam behind her, feel his gaze solely focused on the cold velvet curtains concealing the shade. She should say something to him, apologize or thank him or just say something kind. She felt him tensing as if he too wanted to say something. Somewhere in the theater, a gong began signaling the audience to take their seats. It was now or never. She didn't know why her heart thundered the way it did, but she didn't give herself a chance to second guess as she twisted to look at him. She glanced once at his clothes and said, "You look handsome." His brows rose, and she swiftly turned back forward in her seat. He looked better than handsome, but, well, at least she'd said one thing that was nice. Sam's hand brushed her shoulder. She almost jumped out of her skin as he brought his mouth close to her ear and murmured, You look beautiful, but I bet you already knew that. She did. She gave him a sidelong glare and found him grinning as he leaned back in his seat. Suppressing the urge to smile, she turned toward the stage. And this is where we get like a whole lot of Selena really being in love with music. She has almost, without it being sexual, she has a very sensual relationship with music. It makes her come to life. She is just truly, I don't know how to explain it, other than she's one of those people that gets incredibly severely affected. Like, she'll cry as songs like hit their highest peak. She really feels like she's been taken through a story, and this is something that happens throughout the entirety of the Throne of Glass series, is we see how much Selena is affected by music. So this music was taking her on a complete journey, and she is having an amazing time. The quote literally says, "The music annihilated her." And then Lysandra goes at the end of the performance when the curtain has closed, and Selena's been crying, her face is puffy. Lysandra says, "Selena, I didn't know you had a shred of human emotion in you. I didn't think the performance was even that good." Sam gripped the back of Lysandra's chair. "Shut up, Lysandra." Sam's defense sent a faint trickle of pleasure through her. So that's just like a cute little standing up for her, I don't know. Another cute moment, page 261. There was another party at the Keep that night. She slips into one of the music rooms where it was quiet enough that she could hear a burst of laughter every now and then. The music from the theater still echoed in her mind, and what she wouldn't give to hear the music just once more. She sits down at the pianoforte and tries to play from memory the music from that evening. She was not doing very well. She tried again for a few more minutes, but eventually slammed the lid shut in frustration and stalked from the room. She found Sam lounging against the wall in the hallway. Had he been listening to her fumble the whole time? "Close, but not the same, is it?" he said. "It must drive you mad not being able to get it exactly the way you remember it." He tried to keep pace beside her. "I was just fooling around. I can't be the best at everything, you know. It wouldn't be fair to the rest of you." Selena stops walking. "Why are you helping Lysandra?" She didn't even know why she asked this. "Because Arabin told me to, and since I have no desire to have my face beaten to a pulp again, I'm not going to question him." "He hurt you badly too?" she asked. He let out a low laugh, but didn't reply until after a servant had bustled past them. They probably should be talking in a room where they'd be less likely to be overheard, but the idea of being alone with him made her pulse pound. "I was unconscious for a day and dozed on and off for 3 after that. He sent you to the Red Desert," his words soft and low. "My punishment was having to watch him beat you that night." "Why?" Another question she didn't know why she asked. He closed the distance between them, standing near enough now that she could see the fine gold thread detailing on his tunic. "After what we went through in Skulls Bay, you should know the answer." She didn't want to know the answer. Now that she had thought about it, "Are you gonna make a bid for Lysandra?" Sam burst out laughing. "Bid? Selena, I don't have any money, and the money I do have is going towards paying back Arabin. Even if I wanted to," she cuts him off. "Do you want to?" He gave her a lazy grin. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I'm just curious whether Arabin beating you damaged your brain." "Afraid she and I had a summer romance?" She could have raked her nails down his face. "I hope you did. I certainly enjoyed myself this summer." His smile faded. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say that the son of the Mute Master was far more welcoming than the other silent assassins." It wasn't quite a lie. Ilias had tried to kiss her, and she had basked in his attention, but she didn't want to start anything between them. Sam's face paled. Her words had really struck home, but it wasn't satisfying. Instead, the mere fact that she had affected him in this way made her feel, oh gods, why had she even said anything? Sam began to turn away. "Help me with Donoval," she blurted. I'll give you half the money. Keep your money. Ruining yet another slave trade agreement will be enough for me. You're sure you want my help?" "Yes," she said. It came out a bit strangled. There was much more she wanted to say to him, and she didn't want him to go, but her throat closed up. "Selena," she looked back at him. "I missed you this summer." So now they're on the roof surveying Donoval's house. This is the next day. They're taking notes about the guards' movements, but really the scene is here to have more bantering between the two of them. Page 267 if you're curious. "So, the Mute Master's son," she could groan. "How close were you exactly?" He was focused on the house, though she noticed that he had fisted his hands. "Just tell him the truth, idiot," she was thinking to herself. Nothing happened with Ilias. It was only a bit of a flirtation, but nothing happened. "Well," he said after a moment, "nothing happened with Lysandra, and nothing is going to, ever." "And why do you think I care?" she said. He nudged her with his shoulder. "Since we're friends now, I'd assume you'd want to know. She was grateful that her hood concealed most of her burning hot face. I think I preferred it when you wanted to kill me. Sam says, sometimes I think so too. She jabs him with his elbow and says, you should shut up and just pay more attention. So they return from their scouting and Selena is freezing cold and soaking wet. She sits in a flaming hot bath for like an hour and gets out to dress for the ball that evening. On her bed, she spies a sheet of papers tied in red thread. A note on it reading, try not to bawl your eyes out when you play this. It took a lot of bribes to get. She couldn't help but smile because it was the music from the theater that night, which wouldn't be published for years to come, if at all. At the party, they were there to scout. They would watch Donovan for a while as he was seated with a bunch of courtesans, touching them and getting wasted. So he's basically sitting with like 6 girls on pillows on the floor. He's getting completely drunk. And this party is hosted by his ex-wife, the one who put out the hit on her ex-husband, Donovan. And she's throwing this party specifically so that they can get her closer to Donovan. Selena decides to approach him acting as a young girl whose father is a merchant and wants to meet with him. She says her father is sick and that's why he's not there, and so hopefully he can forgive her impertinence for speaking to him at such a party. She acts like a prude and like a very innocent girl. So she's not really making eye contact with him. She's acting very shy. He's like rubbing the inside of the thigh of like the courtesans who he's next to. And I'm sorry I'm pronouncing that word, like flip-flopping between it. I genuinely just say it how I say it in the moment. She acts like she can't think straight from how explicit he's being with the courtesans. He pulls his hands away from the courtesans and he's like, what is it? Like, speak. So now she's got his full attention and she wants to smile, but she doesn't want to break character. She notices he's clearly drinking her in and she's disgusted, but happy that the distraction is working so well. She gets the information about the comings and goings and they set up an appointment for her to see him later. After she's certain he's not watching her anymore and is forgotten by his drunk and sex-addled brain by the Clarice girls, the courtesans, she returns to Sam happy. She lets herself go into the music and loses herself. So this next part, if you haven't read the series yet, I do recommend that in order to keep the train of thought of actually reading through this for the first time without knowing anything, I recommend that you skip to this time code in order to not spoil anything. And this is not inherently a spoiler. It does just introduce people very minorly, like incredibly minorly. This will be really cool for those of you who have read this book before or who do know of these characters. But if you care about it, I really recommend skipping this part. And I will remind you of this in my Throne of Glass video, and I will share what I'm about to say in my Throne of Glass video. But this is really cool. I literally called my best friend as I read this and discovered it because anyways, you've been warned. Page 282 if you're curious in the book. So she's like dancing her mind away. It has been hours and hours and hours. It's now 3 in the morning. How had so many hours passed? And I mean, she's literally, think like in the movie Tangled when Rapunzel is like dancing with all the people in the village in the circle. Like that's kind of like what's happening at this party, except everybody is drunk listening to this amazing music. It's described as a performance, an orgy, a call to worship at the altar of excess. And Selena was a willing sacrifice. So that's the vibe. 4 young men wearing masks stood atop the steps, surveying the crowd. It took all of 2 heartbeats for her to see that the dark-haired youth was the ringleader. The masked strangers swaggered down the steps, and one of them kept close to the dark-haired youth. That one had a sword, she noticed. From his tensed shoulders, she could tell he was not happy to be there. But the lips of the ringleader parted into a grin as he stalked into the crowd. Gods above, even with the mask obscuring his features, he was handsome. She danced as she watched him, and as if he had somehow sensed her, their eyes met from across the room. She gave him a smile and then deliberately turned back towards the singers, her dancing a little more careful, a little bit more inviting. She found Sam frowning at her and she gave him a shrug. It took the masked stranger a few minutes and a knowing smile from her to suggest that she, too, knew exactly where he was. But soon, she felt a hand slide around her waist. Some party, the stranger whispered into her ear. She twisted to see sapphire eyes gleaming at her. Are you from Melisande? She swayed, perhaps. His smile grew. "What's your name?" he asked. She leaned close. "My name is Wind," she whispered, "and rain, and bone, and dust. My name is a snippet of a half-remembered song." He let out a low, delightful sound. She was drunk and silly and full of glory, of being young and alive in the capital of the world, and she could hardly contain herself. "I have no name," she purred. "I am whoever the keepers of my fate tell me to be." Okay. He grasped her by the wrist, running his thumb along the sensitive skin underneath. "Then let me call you mine for a dance or two." Sorry, I just think that's so smooth. In case you didn't put it together, the dark-haired youth who's the ringleader is Prince Dorian. And the one with the sword, who doesn't want to be there, is Kale. And I have read this book now. I had read it twice. When I was reading it through my third time, that was when I caught it. I don't know how on my second read through I missed it, because the sapphire eyes are kind of a big deal with Dorian. The Kale reference is definitely harder to catch, but they meet in this scene over a year before they ever meet again. And none of the three, ever think back to this moment and remember this. So this is just a cute little Easter egg that's in here for people. And I read this book at the very beginning of my journey because it came first in the box set that my mom purchased me. I freaked out. Sam is like, "Dude, what the hell are you doing? You need to go home, you're drunk." And she's like, "Let me live. I can take care of myself." And they kind of start to get in a little fight. Selena is drunk and her jealousy comes out for a moment. She's like, "Shouldn't you go be with Lysandra?" And he's like, "I don't want Lysandra or anyone else for hire, and you're a damn fool for not seeing it." And she's like, "Can we just not fight right now? Can we just talk about this tomorrow?" And he's like, "Fine. If you can remember anything tomorrow, we'll talk about this tomorrow." A young woman pulling her into a circle of dancing girls, and the revelry took hold of her again. In the next scene, same night, so it's like dawn, right? It was 3 a.m. Now it's around 6 a.m.-ish. She's at her new apartment after the party, sitting on the roof, taking in the landscape. This place was hers and hers alone, or it would soon be, as soon as she told Arabin that she was leaving, which she'd do as soon as she finished the business with Donoval, or sometime soon after that. Maybe. The next day, Sam and Selena are in the middle of training, and he is shirtless and glistening. She asks if they're gonna break into Donoval's that night, and Sam says that they can't because of Lysandra's pre-bidding rehearsal, and he needs to be there for security. So she's like, "I'll just go alone. That's totally fine. You can catch up with me if you can." At the end of it, and he's like, "Hey, this is dangerous. You probably shouldn't go alone." And she's like, "Dude, I have literally freed 200 slaves and done a bunch of other shit." She's surveying Donoval's house, noting the guards in their positions. She decides that now is her window of opportunity to break into the house and check things out. She hauls herself onto a window ledge, and with 2 flicks of her wrist, she had the window opened. She slid into the study, being quiet. She barely sensed the attack a heartbeat before it happened. She was able to fight for a moment, and she struck someone with a knife, kicked another in the stomach, and knocked another out. But then she noticed how many there were. Too many. Someone grabbed her from behind while someone else hit her on the head, and a third applied a cloth over her face. Something like chloroform. Selena wakes up in a chair in the sewers underneath the house. She's completely tied up around her waist, around her arms, around her thighs, and then her ankles. She's being very cocky and arrogant. She's like, "Are you guys gonna torture me first, or are you just gonna kill me? Can we just get this over with?" One of the guards is asking some questions. His name is Philip, but the second guard who's there is like, "Philip, we have to go." And there's like some kind of sloshing sounds that are happening, and Selena's not thinking too much of it. After trying to ask her a couple more questions, the second guard is like, "Philip, we have to get the fuck out of here." That's when Philip reveals to her that it is Wash Away Day, which is where the government, the kingdom, fills the sewers to clear any trash, rats, rodents out of it. So literally they flood the sewers all the way up to the grates through the entire kingdom. She makes fun of him for not just killing him herself. "You guys really don't like getting your feet dirty, do you?" And then she goes, "Too bad that they won't get all the trash," batting her eyelashes. "No," he said, "but they'll get you, or at least the river will get your remains, if the rats have even left enough left." And then she starts to realize her situation. "Enjoy your swim," Philip says. Then he dips. They lock the iron door shut behind them. This next part, I am going to read out the highlighted sections instead of paraphrasing to try to get across this moment. Darkness and water. In the moments it took for her to adjust to the dim streetlight leaking in through the grate high above the water, it was up to her lap in an instant. She cursed violently and wiggled hard against the ropes, but then she remembered the built-in blades. Bindings were almost too tight for her to release. She twisted her wrists, fighting for any shred of space to flick her hand. The water pooled at her waist. It would take minutes before it had completely flooded. At last, the whine and splash of the blade as it shot out caused pain to lance down her side, her hand, and she swore. She had cut herself. There was a release of tension around her middle, and she fell face first into the swirling black water full of excrement, dead rats, and who knows what else. When she stood, the water was at her thighs, and just a reminder that she is 5'7". She felt things sliding against her as she splashed for the landing, struggling to keep upright in the fierce current. By the time she reached the stone steps, the water was already pooling there. She tried the iron handle, but it was locked, and she was trapped. Selena looked down the length of the sewer. There had to be some ladder. There had to be. She couldn't see any, not near her, and the grates were so high up that she'd have to wait until the sewer filled before trying her luck. Think, she whispered. Think, think, think. Water rose higher in the landing, now at her ankles. She kept her breathing calm because panicking would accomplish nothing. Think! She scanned the sewer. There might be a ladder, but it would be way farther down, which meant braving the water and the dark. On her left, the water rose endlessly, rushing in from the other half of the city. Selena sheathed her blades and plunged into the smelly, oily excrement water, and her throat closed up. She was not swimming through the entire capital's refuse. She was not swimming through rat-infested waters. She was not going to die. The current was faster than expected. And then there on the right, midway up the wall, several feet above the water, was a very small tunnel. It had to lead to the street. She fought against the current and just barely hit the wall and tried to cling to it, easing down the side. The tunnel was high up enough that she had to reach, her fingers aching as they dug into the stone, but she had a grip. And even though the pain lanced through her nails as they came off her fingers, she hauled herself up the narrow passage. It was so small inside, she had to lie flat on her belly. It was full of mud and God knows what else. But there was a shaft of lamplight. Behind her, the sewer flooded, and roaring waters were near deafening. With the ceiling low, she had to keep her head down, her face nearly in the putrid mud, as she stretched her arms and pulled. She dragged herself inch by her fingertips. The water reached her tunnel. Within moments, it swept past her feet, her legs, her abdomen, then her face. She tried crawling faster, not needing light to tell her how bloody her hands were. Each bit of grit inside the cuts was fire. Go, she thought. Go, go, go. The word was the only thing to keep her from screaming, because once she started screaming, that's when she would concede to death. The water in the passage was a few inches deep by the time she hit the upward tunnel at the end. She nearly sobbed at the sight of the ladder. It was probably 15 feet to the surface. Through the circular holes in the large grate, she spied a hovering street lamp. Water filled the tunnel bottom, swirling with debris. She was now trapped. She was quickly to the top and even allowed herself a little smile as she pushed against the round grate, but it did not budge. She balanced on her feet on the rickety ladder and pushed with both hands. It would not move. She started throwing herself into it. Nothing, not a groan. She pounded her hands against it until she felt something crack and her vision flashed with pain. The water was close now, so close. The muddy froth near that she could reach down and touch it. She threw herself into the grate one last time. It didn't move. Rainwater poured into her mouth, her eyes, her nose. She banged against the metal, praying for anyone to hear her over the roar of the rain, for anyone to see the muddy, bloody fingers straining through the grate. The water hit her boots. She shoved her fingers through the grate holes and began screaming. She screamed until her lungs burned, screamed for help, for anything. Selena? It was a shout, and it was close. Selena sobbed when she heard Sam's voice. He said he'd come by after helping with Lysandra's party. She wriggled her fingers through the grate hole, pounding her hand against the grate. Here, I'm in the sewer. He said, ... Holy gods. I've been looking for you for 20 minutes, hold on. His calloused fingers latched the holes. She saw them go white with strain, saw his face turn red, then he swore. The water was at her calves. Get me out of here. Shove with me, he said. They tried again and again. The water hit her knees. Get as high as you can, he barked. She already was, but she didn't say anything. She caught the flash of a knife and heard the scrape of a blade against the grate. He was trying to loosen the metal by using the blade as a lever. Push on the other side. She pushed. Dark water lapping at her thighs. The knife snapped in two. He swore violently and began yanking the grate cover. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on." The water was at her waist now and over her chest a moment after. "Sam," she said. "I'm trying." "Sam," she repeated. "No," he spat. "No." He began screaming for help. Selena pressed her face to the hole in the grate. Help was not coming. She'd never given much thought to how she would die, but drowning felt very fitting. It was a river in her native country of Terrasen that had almost claimed her life 9 years ago. And now it seemed that whatever bargain she'd struck with the gods that night had run out. The water would have her one way or another. "Please," Sam begged, trying to wedge another dagger under the lid. "Please don't." She knew he wasn't speaking to her. The water hit her neck. "Please," Sam moaned, his fingers now touching hers. She'd have one last breath, her final words. "Take my body home to Terrasen, Sam," she whispered, and with a gasping breath, she went under. Someone was roaring as they pounded on her chest. "Breathe!" Her body seized and water rushed out of her. "Oh my gods," Sam moaned. She found him kneeling beside her, his head hung between his shoulders as he braced his palms on his knees. One of them held a crowbar. Beside her lay the grate cover, and around them spilled water from the sewer. She vomited again. She literally died, drowned. Sam went in to save her. They were able to just barely save her. She takes a lot of baths after this. She drinks a ton of liquor because she's trying to clean out the insides of her body with as strong of liquor as she can find. And then she takes 3 baths consecutively, huge ones. Then she takes 2 baths in alcohol. And then she promises herself that later that night, after she wakes up, she'll take 2 more baths. Sam shows up after her 4th bath and she's prepared to kick him out as she was about to go to bed. But because he saved her life, she was in his eternal debt and she let him in. "What do you want?" It wasn't the kindest thing to say to him, but she was angry with him for the fact that she had to be saved. If she was the best assassin, she shouldn't need to be saved. And yet here she was. It's interesting how she rejects her failures, saying that they just shouldn't have happened in the first place, instead of listening to what her failures could tell her about her situation. She opens up to Sam about what happened with her and Ansel and the scar on her neck. He touches it and it makes her blush, and she decides that she's gonna kill Philip, the guard who locked her in the sewers. The next morning, after she'd had her 2 additional baths, she was in Arabin's study. Telling Sam the story of her month in the Red Desert had reminded her of why she'd wanted so badly to come home this summer and leave Arabin. Selena merely smiled at the King of Assassins as she held the door open for the servants to bring in the heavy trunks, one after another. The servants hurried out and Selena started to smile. "I think this covers my debt," she said, forcing herself to smile, and then some. She swallowed, all of a sudden feeling sick. Arabin remained expressionless and seated. Why had she thought this was a good idea? "I want to keep working with you, but you don't own me anymore." His silver eyes flicked to the trunks, then to her. "Can you blame me for hoping this day would never come? I mean it. I want to keep working with you." "Do I even want to know where this money came from?" "The mute master. Payment for saving his life." "Allow me to extend my congratulations. You're a free woman." "Good luck with Donoval tomorrow night," he added. "Let me know if you need any help." "As long as you don't charge me for it," she said. He didn't return her smile and set down his paper. "I would never do that to you." Hurt flickered in his eyes. Fighting her urge to apologize, she left his study without a word. She'd expected to crow with glee when she gave him the money and expected to strut around the keep, but the way he'd looked at her made all that gold feel cheap. What a glorious start to her new future. So she pays off Arabin. She's a free woman. She no longer is under his heel. Sam and Selena are in the sewers. They're talking, remarking about the comings and goings of the guards, trying once again, now together, to figure out how they were going to get into Donoval's house. After they finished their conversation about where the guards were, how they were going to get into the house, Sam says, "I heard you pay off Arabin this morning. How does it feel to be free?" She glanced at him. "Not the way that I thought it would." "I'm surprised he accepted the money without a fight," Sam said. In the dim light, he took a ragged breath. "I think I might leave," he whispered. She almost tripped. "Leave?" He wouldn't look at her. "I'm going to Elway, to Benjali. Benjali is the capital of Elway." "For a mission?" "Forever," he said. "Why?" Her voice sounded a little shrill in her ears. "What do I even have to tie me here?" "You talked to Arabin about this?" He said casually, "It's not official." "But Benjali is 1,000 miles away." "Yes, but Rifthold belongs to you and Arabin. I will always be ... an alternative." "I'm probably going to leave at the end of the month," he said. "That's 2 weeks away. You can't go. Do I have any reason to stay here? Yes, she said. Give me a reason why I shouldn't. Because what is the point in anything if you just disappear forever? The point in what, Selena? The point in Skulls Bay, the point in getting me that music, and the point in telling Arabin that you'd forgive him if he never hurt me again. You said you didn't care what I thought or what I did, or if I died, if I'm not mistaken. She interrupts him. I lied, and you knew I lied, you stupid bastard. He laughed quietly. You want to know how I spent this summer? He ran a hand through his hair. I spent every single day fighting the urge to slit Arabin's throat, and he knew I wanted to kill him. I'll kill you, Sam had screamed to Arabin. It's a little memory. The moment I woke up after he beat me, I realized I had to leave because I would kill him if I didn't. But I couldn't. Not until you came back. Not until I knew you were all right and safe. He knew that too. So he decided to exploit it, and he wouldn't give me missions. Instead, he made me guard Lysandra every single day. And now that you're fine, Selena, now that you've paid off your debt, I can't stay in Rifthold. You're okay. She knew it was selfish and horrible, but she whispered, please don't go. He let out an uneven breath. You'll be fine without me. You always have been. Maybe once, she thought, but not now. How can I convince you to stay? You can't. She threw down her torch. Do you want me to beg? Is that it? He says, no, never. She starts, then tell me. And he says, what more can I say? He exploded. I've already told you everything. I've already told you that if I stay here, if I have to live with Arabin, I will snap his neck. But why? Why can't you let it go? He grabs her shoulders and shakes her. Because I love you. Her mouth fell open. I love you, he repeated, shaking her again, and I have for years. And he hurt you, and he made me watch because he knows how I feel. If I asked you to pick Selena, you'd choose Arabin, and I can't take it. The only sounds were their ragged breathing, uneven against the sewer river. You're an idiot, she breathed. You're a moron and an ass and an idiot. He looked like she'd hit him. Because I'd pick you. And then she kissed him. Then we have a cute little moment. I highlighted some of the readable things. They're still in the sewer, by the way. There's literally shit and rats everywhere. She'd never kissed anyone. And as her lips met his and he wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close to him, she had no idea why she had waited so long. His mouth was soft and his body was wondrously solid against hers. His hair silken as she threaded her fingers through it. She was so full of lightning, she thought she might die from the rush of it. She wanted to bask in this feeling. Sam's lips left her mouth and began to travel along her neck. They grazed a spot beneath her ear, and her breathing hitched. And that's all I can read you. They make out. They just make out. They don't do any more than that. But they kiss for like hours. They make it sound like hours. It says that it was dark when they came out of the sewers and their faces were swollen and puffy. That night in her room, she laid awake for a long time after Sam left. They had spent the evening sharing more about themselves with each other, verbally. Tomorrow, they would do the job. She wouldn't let Donovan, the slave-trading bastard, get away with the agreement. In the silence of her room, she swore an oath that if anyone hurt Sam, she would slaughter everyone responsible. It's the next day. They are going to infiltrate Donovan's house, kill him, and try to find the papers. Selena waited for the servant to come with the trash. They had to come. It was just a matter of when. Then she would slip inside and she would wait. Sam wouldn't be sneaking in until right before the meeting. She waited for a long time in the shadows of the cellar's wine collection. At 7, she snuck upstairs to the study before Sam would get there with the torches and oil. With all the alcohol in the cellar, it would certainly be enough to cause a scene. When she got up to the study, it was locked, so she unlocked it. Once inside, she locked the door again and set to finding the papers for the job. She searched all over the study, in the desks, secret compartments, and shelves and libraries, and found nothing. And as she was walking out of the room, she heard the floor creak. She pulled up the floorboard and found everything. Cities, towns, forests, all within Melisande. This information was about safe houses and how to smuggle slaves to freedom, and Donoval was going to turn them into the king or use the information against them in order to get them support his road deal. She would absolutely never let him get away with this. She heard voices coming and quickly put the floorboard back and hid in the armoire. The man who was there with Donoval to pick up the papers was incredibly on edge. Donoval was acting very light and happy, offers him a drink and food, and the man says nothing, and that he just wants it to be over as fast as possible. Donoval tries to get him to relax, however the man does not. As Donoval bends over on the floorboard to pull up the documents, which Selena had stolen and had with her, she is out of the armoire in an instant and has already killed Donoval within just a moment of stepping out of the armoire. As she did that, a huge explosion rocked the entire house and Sam had done it. The man who was here for the meetup was out the door a millisecond after he saw Selena kill Donoval, and she was after him. She makes for the door, and suddenly Philip is in the way. What have you done? Her and Philip get into a fight, and his face is completely white and bloodless. She tells him how much she's going to enjoy killing him, and he sees Donoval on the floor dead. You have no idea what you've just done. She broke his guard immediately and plunges her sword into his chest. He whispers, "Fool." Blood bubbles out of his mouth and he says, "Donoval, ... loved his country, ... you don't know, ... anything." This entire interaction took only 2 minutes, and then she was off and after the man who'd sprinted away. She knocked out 2 more guards on her way and raced out of the house. She finally catches up to the man in an alleyway, and he goes to leap for a wall, but misses and falls onto the cobblestones. She was upon him in just a second. He turns around, lights the documents on fire, and pops a vial into his mouth and bites it. Go to hell. He died instantly. Documents were burned. Completely burned. The only thing that she could make out was that it was probably the locations, names, numbers, and more associated with Adderley's safe houses, and slaves to be brought in there, stretching all the way as far as Terracin, which is north. She stared at his body, and none of this made any sense. Why would he die for this if he was just going to turn the documents over? Something was wrong and something was off. She remembered Philip telling her that she knew nothing. She decided to burn the rest of the documents because she was so confused and felt that this was the only thing she could do for this mysterious man who had killed himself to protect these documents. What she has in her hands is the Melisande version of what this man was going to give and trade to Donoval, which is the locations of safe houses, people, and just like all this stuff associated with people who are trying to save slaves, which Selena thinks they're going to give to the King of Adderley to bust all these safe places and go capture more slaves. But now she's really confused because if this guy was just gonna sell this information, like why would he die for it? Why wouldn't he just try to make a deal with her or just abandon the documents, you know? Selena finds Sam in an alleyway and he's knelt over panting. She's terrified that he's hurt because she sees an arrow. He tells her that he thought he was dead. An arrow went straight for his heart, but it bounced off as though it was made of a toy. He didn't even understand it until he had opened his tunic and realized there was a patch of spider silk in front of his heart. So Selena had had the tinkerer put the patch in Sam's suit and not hers. She decided not to tell him that she was the one who asked for it to be put there. He asks, "Is it done then?" She kisses him and says onto his lips, "It's done." Selena is in Arobyn's study discussing the case with him. Arobyn is really mad because she made a really big mess with this contract. They not only blew up all of Donoval's house, because they lit it on fire, no one was able to find Donoval's body, which meant that there's no way to confirm that he had died. And so Arobyn is super mad because he's like, "You are so amazing. Why the hell did you do so bad? They're not gonna pay us for this. You made a huge scene. We can't even find Donoval's body, and you only have half of the papers you were supposed to get." And she was like, "Well, all that matters is that we've crumpled another slave deal." And he goes, "You haven't figured it out yet, have you?" Selena's throat tightened. Arobyn leaned back into his chair. "Honestly, I expected more from you. All these years I've spent training you, and you couldn't piece together what was happening right before your eyes." "There was no trade agreement," he says, triumph alighting in his eyes. "At least, not between Donoval and his source in Rifthold. The real meetings about the slave trade negotiations have been going on in the Glass Castle, between the king and Lifter, who is Donoval's ex-wife. It was a key point of persuasion and convincing him to let them build their road. The man who poisoned himself, he hadn't been there to trade documents of those opposed to slavery. He and Donovan have been setting up a system of safe houses to form an alliance of people across the entire empire. Donovan had been working to help the slaves, and she had killed him. Worse than that, she had given the documents to Bardingale, the wife. She had wanted to profit from it and use her new road to do it. Arobin and Donoval's ex-wife had concocted the perfect lie to get Selena to cooperate, and Arobin could not stop smiling brightly. Lefter has already seen to it that Donoval's documents are secured. Selena fought to keep from trembling. She asks, "Is this punishment for Skulls Bay?" Arobin studied her. "While I regret beating you, Selena, you ruined a huge deal that would have been incredibly profitable for us. You might be free of me, but you should not forget who I am and what I'm capable of. As long as I live," she said, "I will never forget that." She turned on her heel, striding for the door, and stopped. "Yesterday," she said, "I sold Cassida to Leifter Bardingale," Donald's ex-wife. She'd visited Bardingale's estate that morning, the morning she was set to infiltrate his house. The woman had been more than happy to purchase the Asterian horse. Arobin said, "Why should I care about your sold horse?" "Because," she says, "the money is already on its way to your vault at the bank. And as of this moment, Sam's debt is paid. From right now until forever, he is a free man." Arobin stared back. "I suppose that's a good thing, because I spent all the money you gave me when I was at Lyssandra's bidding last night, and my vault feels empty because of it." It took a moment for his words to sink in. The money she had sacrificed so much to get, he spent it on Lyssandra's bidding. "I'm moving out," she whispered, his cruel, clever mouth forming a smile. "I've purchased an apartment and I'm moving there today. Do come back and visit us sometime, Selena." Why shower her with gifts only to do this? Why deceive her about Donovan and then torture her with it? Why had he saved her life 9 years ago just to treat her this way? "Don't come looking for me for a good long while, because I will kill you if I see you before then." He says, "I look forward to the fight." She had been fooled and lost badly. She didn't want to be in this tangled web anymore, not when Arobin had made it perfectly clear that she would never win. Selena had spent the entire day sending servants between the keep and her apartment, fetching all her clothes, books, and jewelry that now belonged to her and her alone. The afternoon light shifted into a deep gold, setting the green rooftops aglow. "Sam is there," he says. "I can see why you've decided to move." They talk a little bit more, and then he says, "So we're free. I heard that you paid off my debt." His eyes were vivid. She said, "I had no choice. I'd never leave you shackled to him while I went away." "Selena," he said her name like a caress, slipping a hand around her waist. He pressed his forehead against hers. "How can I ever repay you?" "You don't have to," she said, and closed her eyes. He brushed his lips against hers. "I love you, and from today onward, I never want to be separated from you again. Where you go, I go, even if that means to hell itself. Wherever you are, that's where I want to be. Forever." Selena put her arms around his neck and kissed him deeply, giving him her silent reply. Beyond them, the sun set over the capital, turning the world into crimson light and shadows. We are at the teeny tiny end of the book, The Assassin and the Empire. This part goes a lot faster, so hang in there with me. This says after. What I'm about to read you takes place after the events in The Assassin and the Empire. Curled into a corner of a prison wagon, Selena Sardathian watched the splotches of shadows and light on the walls. She rested her head against the musty wooden wall, listening to the creak of the wagon, the clink of the shackles around her wrists and ankles. But while she was aware of it all, a deafening silence had settled over her like a cloak. She knew that she was thirsty and hungry, and that her fingers were numb and cold, but she couldn't even feel it. The wagon hit a rut, jostling so hard her head hit the wall. She didn't feel that either. In the silence, she couldn't hear the worst question of all. Had she brought this upon herself? For a heartbeat, the silence peeled back long enough for that question to worm its way into her skull. And in the dark, she remembered. Now we have 11 days earlier. A month has passed and Selena is at the theater very high up in the rafters. She loses herself in the music and she spies Lysandra and Arobin in their box. And so what I want you to picture is the whole theater, right? and everyone's in their boxes and then people are in the seats down below. She's there for free in the rafters. She was reveling in the music for a moment and then slips out of the theater unnoticed. When she gets home, she sees that Sam isn't there and he's left a note saying not to wait up. She knows what this means. He's out fighting to get money in the vaults, and the vaults are like the criminal underworld. He'd taken up doing this not only to work off aggression and stay in shape, but because he was unbeatable and he made a very good amount of money doing this. They obviously weren't making any more money from Arabin's guild, so they did in fact need it. However, Selena had quite a bit of money saved up, but none of it was Sam's. She showed up and noticed how absolutely unfair it was for anyone to be put up against Sam, because he would never ever lose, and he was on encore number 7. She waited for him to collect his winnings, and then she'd meet him in the street where the real fight would begin. They argue about him in the vault, and he says that they need more money, which gods, yes, they did. She proposes that they each do one more contract and then leave. He says that they should just go to hell with it and leave and figure out everything else along the way. They argue for a really long time about what they do. Selena says she will absolutely not leave everything to just go and slum it somewhere. And that hurts Sam because he doesn't care about how nice and lavishly they live because he's never owned anything before. He's never had niceties like Selena has had. And for her, honestly, Sam is like not enough. And she's not saying that with her words, but she's definitely saying it with her actions. She mentions that if they do run away without buying their way out of the guild, they will be hunted down and killed, just like Arabin had dispatched them many times to go kill runaway assassins. So they made their decision. They needed to pay their way out of the guild and leave forever. There's this moment where she and Sam hug and she smells that he's been using her expensive lavender soap, and this really bothers her, and she tells him to never use her soap again. The apartment is hers, the soap is hers, and that's what she literally thinks in her head. Her and Sam go to Arabin to buy their way out of the guild. She asks how much it will cost to free them from the guild. He writes down on a piece of paper exactly how much money is left in her bank account. And Sam says that they're not gonna do it, and she says, I agree. And he goes, great, I'll get the money transferred right away. You're free. And so they quit the guild. Sam is pissed because he's like, why are you still playing into his games? And she's like, this is what we have to do. And he's like, you don't understand, we can just leave, like we can just go. And she's like, no, you don't understand. And he goes, Selena, what are you gonna realize? You're never gonna win. The more you interact with him, the worse this is going to get. And she's like, you don't understand how anything works. And she's stupid, and Sam is the smartest person in the world, in my opinion. He's like, you're not paying for anything else ever again. I'm gonna pay, I'm gonna work and pay and provide for us. And she's like, okay. So Selena literally gives all of the rest of her money to Arabin, and they officially have no money. After their fight, Selena goes home and Sam heads out. He returns later that night and he brings a contract home to them. They decided that they were going to do another contract, one final contract, to make money so that they can leave the city. Because Selena, like she said, doesn't want to rough it, and even though they're completely free and they, at this point, can get on a boat and go, Selena's like, I'm not gonna do that. I want nice things. I'm not even joking. That's like why. She doesn't want to slum it. She doesn't want to be poor. Sam's like, well then we have to do another contract. She's like, fine. And he goes, and we're gonna do it my way. Since you paid for our freedom, now we're gonna do things my way. And she's like, okay. And she gives him this moment of trust. He brings them their final contract, which is to kill the 2 largest crime lords in the city. She tells him no and eventually gives into it because, like I said, he really wants her to trust him. They were gonna kill Ione Jane, I hope I'm saying that right, and Rourke Farron, who were the 2 crime lords of the city. Ione Jane was like the crime king, and then Rourke was their horrible, nasty second. And just to give you an idea about who Rourke Farron is, he's heavily alluded to torturing. Well, he's outright said to have tortured, murdered, and killed, but then he's also alluded to serious crimes against women, the kind that would get you put away for life. He also informs Selena that they're gonna kill Rourke first, and he would do it without her. She's like, absolutely not, what the hell? And he's like, you're a woman, I'm not letting you anywhere near Rourke Farron. Can you blame me for wanting to keep the girl I love safe? They have a heartfelt moment where Sam is like, do you honestly want to be with me? And she's like, yes. And he's like, well then this is how we're gonna do it. I need you to trust me. They start to have some like spicy time, but she stops it. They're like making out and they start like kind of feeling at each other, starting to get a little declothed. But then she's like, I really want to enjoy every step of this. I don't want to rush anything. And he's like, I don't want to rush anything either. The next day, while Sam is out scoping for Rourke, Arabin shows up at Selena's apartment. She makes him some tea and she's like pretty terrified that he's there. And she's like, of course he knew where I lived. Why did I think he wouldn't know where I live? They start to discuss this case that they've picked up. And Arobin says, what I don't understand is why you and Sam think it's a good idea to dispatch Ione Jane and Rourke Farron. It's none of your business, she said. Our client wanted to operate outside of the guild. Ione Jane, he repeated. Ione Jane, are you insane? I don't see why I should even trust your advice. Even I wouldn't take on Jane. Arobin's gaze burned. And I'm saying that as someone who has spent years thinking of ways to put that man in the grave. I'm not playing these mind games of yours, Arobin. Get out of my house. He stares at her. Jane is the undisputed crime lord in Rifthold for a reason. And Farron, his second, is there for a damn good reason too. You're excellent, Selena, but you are not invincible. She crosses her arms. Maybe you're just trying to dissuade me because you're worried that when I kill him, I will have surpassed you. He shoots to his feet, towering over her. The reason I'm trying to dissuade you, you stupid, ungrateful girl, is because Jane and Farron are lethal. If a client offered me the glass castle itself, I would not touch an offer like that. She's like, dude, after everything you've done to me, how the hell am I supposed to trust you? And then he's like, you know, it'd be a shame if Sam were to figure out where you're truly from and who you are. And she's like, dude, get out of my house. No matter what I've done, I really do love you, Selena. The word hit her like a stone in the head. He had never said that before, ever. She had craved it her entire life. Arobin's neck shifted as he swallowed. I do the things I do because I am afraid and because I do not know how to express how I feel. I did all of those things because I am angry with you for picking Sam. Was it the king of the assassins who spoke, or the father, or the lover who never manifested himself? Stay with me, he said, his eyes flickering. Stay in Rifthold. She swallowed. I'm going. No, he said. Do not go. The word no is what she'd said to him the night he had beaten her. Don't was the word that Ansel had said to her in the desert. He was using his words as chains to bind her again. He had so many chances over the years to tell her that he loved her and he had known how much she had craved those words. But now she had Sam, who had said those words without expecting anything in return, and who loved her for reasons she would never understand. Get out of my house. Arobin turned and left. Sam and Selena go out to dinner at their favorite tavern. How they have the money for that, I do not know. Selena says, tell me your deepest secret. And he says, the only secret I've borne my entire life is that I love you. It was the only thing I believed I would go to the grave without voicing. What's yours? Deep down, she says, I'm a coward. His brows rose. I'm a coward, she repeated, and I'm scared all of the time, always. I get scared too, he murmured into her skin. You want to hear something ridiculous? Whenever I'm scared out of my wits, I tell myself, my name is Sam Portland, and I will not be afraid. And I've been doing that for years. That actually works. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. They have this just cute moment until it's like a fade to black little cute kiss scene. They tail Rourke Farron around the town for 2 more days. And they do happen upon him torturing someone. This is very hard for them to not interrupt because they both have a very high moral compass despite being 2 assassins. After they leave, they have a moment where they're like questioning if they're just like Rourke Farron. And they come back kind of full circle to the moment that they had in Skulls Bay where they're like, no, we're not like him. We didn't have a choice before and we did this because we had to, because it was Arobin or death, but now we have a choice. And once we're out of here, we never have to do anything like this ever again. And it's just a nice little moment, but it is very interesting how they finally start to question their morality because this entire book is about these 2 assassins who like don't want to kill people. Sam and Selena are discussing where they're gonna move to, and he says that they need to leave the entire continent, not just go to Banjali, but they need to go south to the next continent to like Antica or something, which by the way is where the Tor Sesme is from Irene's story. They start to get into a huge fight because Selena's like, I do not want to leave the continent. And Sam is like, you just don't want to leave because Arobin is here. And by the way, he ran into me on the street. And she goes completely white in the face. And she's like, what did he tell you? And Sam said, I didn't let him tell me anything because I decided that you'll tell me your biggest secrets and everything about you on your own time when you're ready. And I was not about to let him goad me into anything, so I just left. And she's like, oh my God, I love you. So she's got some big secret we just don't know. This conversation's happening while they're packing. The next night, it's Sam's mission. Sam heads out to go kill Rourke Farren. They've done all their planning. It is impeccable. They have a foolproof plan. And Selena's only job is to wait at home and trust him that he can do this. 4 hours go by. He's not back. She's like staring at the clock. She finds it really hard to distract herself, but she's like, he has saved me so many times. He's amazing and I never trust him and I'm gonna trust him. She ends up waiting all the way until 11 at night. And it's been like 12 hours now. She goes out and looks for him on the streets, but she doesn't find him, so she returns home just in case he had gone back. Sam did not come back to the house. He was still gone. She's pacing around their house back from her escapades trying to find him. She wasn't sure when she fell asleep, but she soon woke up as the clock chimed 4 a.m. Sam was still not back, and so she left the house once again to look for him. She searched the sewers and everything, and there was absolutely no sign of Sam. It was noon the next day, so it's been over a day now. When she got back from her search, the door was propped open, and she was so ready to let Sam have it for terrifying her so bad. But instead of Sam in her room, in their house, it was Arabin on the couch, and all he could say is, "I'm sorry." Okay, they thought he was still living in the keep, Arabin said. They left him as a message. She reached the mantel, grabbed the clock, and threw it on the floor. "Selena," Arabin breathed. The clock shattered hard against the wall in the dining room. The fragments landed everywhere. "Selena," Arabin said again, "I want to see the body." The words came from a mouth she wasn't sure belonged to her anymore. "No," Arabin said gently. "I want to see the body." "No, Selena, you don't." She walked out the door and down the steps. Perhaps Arabin was lying. Perhaps this was another trick. She knew Arabin followed her, staying a few feet behind her. There had to have been a mistake. She didn't look at the assassins guarding the gates to the keep, or at the housekeeper, or at the assassins who milled in the grand entrance, who stared at them with grief in their eyes. When she figured out where they were keeping Sam, where they were hiding him, she'd stop at nothing at all to find him, and then she would slaughter them all. But down and down they went, in the dark passageway, to the door across from the dungeon entrance. She knew that door, knew the room behind it, the mortuary where they kept their members until... No, this had to be a mistake. "Please, Selena," Arabin says. "It's better if you don't." Each step brought her closer to the body on the table. She didn't know where to look first. At the fingers that went the wrong way, at the burns and the careful deep slices in his face. The face she still knew, even when it was beyond recognition. The world turned and swayed beneath her feet, but she kept upright as she finished the walk to the table and looked down at the naked, mutilated body she had. Farren had taken his time. And though the face was in ruins, it betrayed none of the pain that he had felt, none of the despair. This had to be some dream, or she had gone to hell, because she could not exist in a world where this had been done to him, to her Sam. She had paced around like an idiot all night, while Farren tortured him, ripped out his eyes and... Selena vomited on the floor. Footsteps, and then Arabin's hands were on her shoulder, her waist. He was dead. Sam was dead. She crawls onto the mortuary table to lay with Sam, and she just cries her little heart out. And this was really hard for me to read. When I read it the very first time, I was crying. We don't know how much time goes by because Selena is like detached from reality, but she's laying in the room in the Assassin's Keep. She's not at her apartment. There's a conversation outside her door between Arabin and two of his assassins. It's Arabin standing there talking with Harding and Turn, and those are the ones who held Sam back while they beat Selena and made him watch. Same assassins from like the very beginning of the book. They're discussing their plan to get into Rourke's house, Rourke Farren's house, the second in command. There are different entrances, and they discuss a window on the second story that they can get in through. And after their conversation is finished, Selena is pretending she's not hearing any of this. Her door opens and she pretends to be asleep. Arabin walks over to her, kind of like drags his fingers across her cheek and plays with her hair for a minute and gives her a kiss, locks her in her room. She decides that she is going to absolutely obliterate every single person involved. She goes into this like bloodlust rage. She promised that anyone who hurt Sam, she would absolutely slaughter. She'd kill Jane first, and then she'd drag Farron to a place where she could properly repay him and take however long she wanted. When Farron had no more agony or blood to offer, she would then take Sam to the embrace of the earth and send him into the afterlife, knowing he had been avenged. Psycho crazy right now. Like, she's going to go kill. She's not thinking straight at all. She snuck out of her room. She has no suit. She has no weapons. She literally just is wearing whatever clothes she can find, which is just like a random pair of pants and a shirt. And she sneaks out her window, and Wesley catches her, and he is Arobyn's like assistant. He's the one who always guards Arobyn like all the time. He says, "Where the hell do you think you're going?" He breathed, not losing a grip on her shoulders, even as she pressed a dagger to his throat. "Get out of my way," she growls, hardly recognizing her own voice. "Arobyn cannot keep me locked up." "I'm not talking about Arobyn. Use your head and think, Selena." A flicker of her, a part that had somehow vanished since she'd shattered that clock, realized that this might be the first time Wesley had ever addressed her by her name. "Get out of my way," she repeated, pushing the blade hard against his throat. "I know you want revenge," he pants. "I do too, for what he did to Sam. I know you." And then she flicks the blade, angling it enough that he has to rear back and stop talking to avoid a deep line being sliced across his throat. "Don't you understand?" he pleaded, his eyes gleaming in the dark. "It's all just a..." But fire rose up in Selena and she whirled. Using a move the master had taught her that summer, Wesley's eyes lost focus as she slammed the pommel of her dagger into the side of his head, and he dropped like a stone. She was fire, she was darkness. She was blood and dust and shadow. She hurtled through the trees, each step faster than the last, and that black fire burned through thought and feeling until all that remained was her rage and her prey. Despite the fog, the years of training made her instinctively scan the rooftops. Was it arrogance or stupidity that kept Jane from having guards on the nearby roofs? Even the guards on the street did not look up at her. She was running across the rooftops, running out of runway. 40 feet, 30 feet, 25. She tucked her head into her chest, bracing for impact as she leaped through the air into the curtains of the house on the second story, ripping them off their hangings. Right into a meeting room full of people. Jane, Farron, and others sitting at a table, and a dozen guards now staring at her. The curtains were thick enough to have blocked out any light and to make it look like it had been dark inside. This was a trick. Farron was smiling at her, his eyes wide, but Jane was on his feet, gasping. So she has jumped into this room full of like 20 people, and she just starts beating the absolute shit out of every single person there. She kills Ione Jane. She like flings a dagger, hits him right in the face, and he dies. And Rourke Farron is like loving this. He's like having the time of his life. But then all of a sudden, smoke starts pouring into the room. The door shuts, and she looks up and realizes that everyone in the room has pulled out a mask. She knew the smell. It had been on Sam's corpse. There was this musky, strange feeling, and then the world jolted to the side. They had been waiting for her. They had left the window open. When she woke up, she heard them say, "None of you are to touch her." "Hello, Selena," he purred. Someone had betrayed her, not Arobyn. Not when he hated Ione Jane and Rourke Farron so much. It could not be Arobyn. "I've been waiting a few years to meet you, you know. To be honest, I'm disappointed. You walked right into our trap. You didn't even stop to think twice about it, did you?" "Don't worry. The numbness from the Gloriella will wear off. It should wear off in about 6 hours. At least that's how long it lasted on your companion." "You know," he purred, "you are quite beautiful. I can see why Arobyn kept you as a pet for so many years. I'm half tempted to keep you for myself. Instead of handing you over, maybe I'll just take you downstairs." But that wasn't our bargain. What was our bargain? Let me think here. We kill Sam Cortland. You go berserk, break in here, and then you kill Jane. And I take Jane's place. Really a pity that I need to blame you for Jane's death, but handing you over to the king would just make such a good gift. And this is when Selena realized that Farron was going to give Selena over to the king as a gift, giving him the biggest serial killer in the city as a gift to look the other way, essentially. From their criminal underworld. Who had betrayed her so foully? Everyone adored Sam, even Wesley. Wesley, he had tried to tell her, "It's all just a..." And then his face had been set with irritation and grief. Had Arabin sent Wesley to warn her? Harding, the assassin who'd been talking about the window, he had always had his eye on her position as heir. It had to be him, because the alternative... No, she would not even think of the alternative. He knocks her out again, and she wakes up in the dungeons of the castle. She knew 3 things before she even opened her eyes. The first was that at least 6 hours had passed because she could move her body. The second was that because at least 6 hours had passed, Arabin and the others had clearly not found her yet. So she was either in the dungeons or in the cell beneath Jane's house. The third was that Sam was still dead, and her rage against him had been a pawn in a betrayal so twisted that she couldn't even wrap her head around it. She had to have been betrayed by Harding or someone like him. Someone who would benefit from her being permanently gone, with no hope of ever coming back. And Arabin still hadn't rescued her. She's like down in the dungeons, they're bringing her food, it's gross. The guards are like really confused and surprised. They're like, that's Adderlin's assassin? That's a girl, that's a child. And a bunch of them are like, yeah, that's definitely not her. Like, they just picked some girl off the street because they needed someone to blame. It's just a bunch of conversations between the guards about Selena, just a bunch of gossip. They talk about how she's going to probably be executed, and she just starts to give up. She's terrified about the King of Adderlin, and we don't know why. Like, anytime he comes up in her thoughts or in a conversation with the guards, she just like blanches. 2 days had passed somehow. A rag and a bucket of water were thrown at her. Clean yourself up for the trial, they said, and she had obeyed. She was brought into a room. It was large, but sparsely appointed. She had been shoved into a chair in the center of the room, a very safe distance from the massive table on the far end. Everyone in the room, the men at the table and dozens of guards, were watching her. A hanging or a beheading. And her throat closed up. There was no point in even fighting, not now. She deserved this. For more reasons than she could count, she should never have allowed Sam to convince her to dispatch Farron on his own. All of this was her fault. Set in motion from the day she'd arrived in Skulls Bay and decided to make a stand for something. A small door at the end of the room opened, and the men got to their feet. The King of Adderlin entered the room. She wouldn't look at him. Let him do what he wanted to her. If she looked in his eyes, what semblance of calm she had would be shredded. Better to go to her grave numb and dazed than begging. I didn't believe the rumors until now, the king said. But it seems the guards were not lying about your age. How old are you? She didn't reply. Did Rourke Farron get his claws on you, or are you just being willful? She said nothing. Very well then. Do you deny that you are Selena Sardothian? If you do not speak, then I will take your silence for acquiescence, girl. She kept her mouth shut. Read the charges, Counselor Rensel. You, Selena Sardothian, are being charged with the deaths of the following people. And then he began a long recitation of all of the lives she had taken. Arabin had seen to it that the world knew of her handiwork. He always got word out through secret channels when another victim had fallen to Selena Sardothian. Do you deny any of these charges? Her breathing was slow. Girl, the councilman said, we will take your lack of response to mean you do not deny them. She didn't even bother to nod. It was over anyways. Then I will decide your sentence, the king growled. Footsteps suddenly thudded toward her table, and she heard the sound of weapons being angled. She recognized the footsteps before the king even reached her chair. Look at me. She kept her gaze on his boots. Look at me. Selena raised her head and looked at the King of Adderlin. The blood drained from her face. Those black eyes were poised to devour the world. The features were harsh and weathered. He wore a sword at his side, the sword whose name everyone knew, and a fine tunic and fur cloak. In her head, she goes, get away. Do you have any last requests before I announce your sentence? She could still smell the smoke that had suffocated every inch of Terrason 9 years ago. Still smell the flesh and hear the screams as the king and his armies wiped out every last trace of resistance, every trace of magic. No matter what Arabin had trained her to do, those memories of her last few weeks in Terrason were imprinted on her blood, so she just stared back at the King of Adderlin. She did not reply, and he turned on his heel and walked back to the table. That brash, foolish fire flared up in her one more time, for only a moment. I do, she said. Then she smiled, a wicked, wild thing. Make it quick. It was a challenge, not a plea, but the king's eyes narrowed. And when he smiled at her, It was the most horrific thing he had ever seen. If it is an easy death you desire, Selena Sardothian, I will not give it to you, not until you have suffered. You, Selena Sardothian, are sentenced to 9 lives worth of labor in the salt mines of Endovier. Her blood turned to ice. You will be sent with orders to keep you alive for as long as possible, so that you can enjoy Endovier's special kind of agony. Endovier. And then throughout the rest of this entire book, she's just randomly thinking Endovier, like in between the paragraph breaks. The king turned away. Endovier, Endovier, Endovier. New shackles were hammered shut, and the dark interior of a prison wagon was before her. Through the small window and high doors, she could see the capital, streets that she knew so well, the people milling about. They passed the assassin's keep where she had trained and bled and lost everything, where Sam's body lay, waiting for her to bury him. The game had been played, and she had lost. They came to the looming alabaster walls of the city. Their gates were thrown open to accommodate their party. As Selena Sardothian was led out of the capital, she sank into a corner of the wagon and did not get up. Now we have a POV change. We are with Arobin Hamel and Rourke Farron, the new king of the underworld. Rourke Farron and Arobin Hamel watched as the prison wagon was escorted out of the city. Endovier then. Farron mused. His dark eyes were upon the wagon. A twisting surprise of events. I thought you had planned a grand rescue from the butchering block. The king of assassins said nothing. So you're not going after the wagon? Obviously not, Arobin said, glancing at the crime lord of Rifthold. You and your men could free her in moments. This is a much safer rescue than what you had originally planned. Though, I'll admit, sending her to Endovier is much more interesting to me. If I wanted your opinion, Farron, I would have asked for it. Farron gave him a low smile. You might want to consider how you speak to me from now on. And you might want to consider who gave you your crown. Farron chuckled. Honestly, if you wanted her to suffer, you should have just left her in my care. I would have had her begging for you to save her in a matter of minutes. Arobin shakes his head. Whatever gutter you grew up in, it must have been an unparalleled sort of hell. Farron studies his new ally. You have no idea. And after a moment of quiet, Farron asked him, why did you do it? Arobin's attention drifted to the wagon, already a small dot in the rolling foothills above Rifthold. Because I don't like sharing my belongings. Then we go back to the after. Selena had been in the wagon for 2 days now. She had believed she could love Sam and not pay the price. Everything has a price, she'd been told by the spider silk merchant. How right he was. 2 weeks in this dark, reeking wagon with only shadows and light for company. No one survived Endovier. Most prisoners didn't even survive a month. It was truly a death camp. So she was going to Endovier. She was going to be a slave in the salt mines. Fear, ravenous and cold, dragged her under. Selena knew that she was nearing the salt mines when 2 weeks later, the trees of Oakwald gave way to rough terrain, and jagged mountains pierced the sky. Endovier. She wasn't ready. She let out a sob so violent she had to press her fist to her mouth to keep from being heard. She would never be ready for this. Her trembling paused for a heartbeat. She knew that breeze. She knew the chill bite beneath it, knew it carried a hint of pine and snow, knew the mountains from which it hailed. A northern breeze, the breeze of Terrasen. She must stand up. Pine and snow and lazy golden summers, a city of light and music in the shadow of the Staghorn Mountains. She must stand, or she would be broken before she ever set foot in Endovier. My name is Selena Sardothian, she whispered to the floor. My name is Selena Sardothian. She tried again, but she couldn't get her uneven breaths out. Selena closed and then opened her eyes. She would go into Endovier, into hell, and she would not crumble. She would tuck Sam into a little corner of her heart, a bright light for her to take out whenever things got too dark. And then she would remember how it had felt to be loved when the world had held nothing but possibility. No matter what they did to her, they would never be able to take that from her. And someday, even if it took her until her last breath, she would find out who had done this to her. Selena wiped away her tears as the wagon entered the shade of the tunnel through the wall. Whips and screams in the clank of chains. She tensed, already taking in every detail, but she squared her shoulders and straightened her spine. My name is Selena Sardothian, she whispered, and I will not be afraid. She raised her head. She let them grab her and pull her from the wagon. She thinks, I will not be afraid. Selena lifted her chin and walked into the salt mines of Endovier. And that's the end of Assassin's Blade. I freaking love this book. I think it is so good. but I'm gonna end this video because I've been talking for so long that I feel like I'm in space. We're gonna do Throne of Glass next, so let me know if you're excited for that. If you haven't read this before and you're just gonna experience the story exclusively by watching my videos, let me know your theories, let me know your thoughts. Also, I do recommend, if this has really intrigued you, please don't watch the rest of my videos until you've read the books yourself. The journey that Throne of Glass takes you through is it is just unparalleled high fantasy. It is amazing. There's also romance, and there is, oh gosh, it's just so, I can't. I'm so glad I discovered the series. Obviously, I didn't discover it, other people read it, but no one told me to read this, and I'm so glad I did. It opened up the world of reading to me. I have a Kindle now, and I read it like 9 hours a day. Anyways, that is Assassin's Blade. Thank you for going on this journey with me. A reminder that all of the artists will be linked in the description in case you want to go follow those Instagram pages yourself. And I am out of breath, so I am gonna upload this footage and get this video edited and uploaded, and then try to finish taking my notes for Throne of Glass, and then maybe filming it, hopefully before I have my baby, so that I can have something to edit. This book was a lot harder for me to start filming because it's very slow at the beginning. It doesn't just jump into things, and it doesn't have one straightforward plot like every other book does. Obviously, they get a little bit more discombobulated as you get through the series. I mean, you get to the end of the Throne of Glass series and there's like 13 different POVs that you're going through. I think this will be a fun project. We'll post each of these videos, and then I'll take all of these videos and make them into one massive freaking video and then post that as well, so people can have like a 9-hour long or however long video of the entire series to work through. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the Throne of Glass. Goodbye. Oh my gosh!